Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's great to be back on the Evening Exchange. I've been off for a week, maybe you didn't even notice, but it's great to be here. Thank you so much for your company. So much has changed in the last week, but Keir Starmer is under a huge amount of pressure. We'll go into all of that in a few minutes' time. We'll also speak to someone who was at that press corps event that terrifying assassination attempt against Donald Trump happened at. We'll speak to a journalist who was there a little bit later on in the programme. The SNP in Scotland also saying that they believe there should be more immigration to Scotland, more migration to Scotland. What do you think about that? Maybe you're in Scotland, maybe you're in another part of the UK. What's your view on all of that? We'll talk about the car bomb in Northern Ireland that nobody's talking about. It's been ignored by so much of the media. It's really, really important. The fact is there's still terrorists in Northern Ireland, here in the United Kingdom, who are trying to kill and maim and stop the peace process. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And we will ask another big question: where are all the teaspoons? There has been a professorial study, yes, really, of why teaspoons go missing from offices, from workplaces, from different kitchens, maybe in your factory or wherever you work. You're thinking, hold on a second, there used to be 20 teaspoons, now there are only 3. Where have they gone? We're going to find out later from a professor who has been looking into this. Yes, really. We'll talk as well about lots of other things, and indeed whatever you want to talk about. So let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message to 0344 499 1000, the same number for calls and the same number for WhatsApp text messages too. Thank you to everybody who kept in touch, mainly on Twitter during the week off. I was teaching some journalism students. There are bright futures ahead of them, and they're going to do really, really well. Some of them, in fact, are going to come in and see what we do here at Talk. So lots to discuss this evening and right throughout the week here on the Evening Exchange. Stay with us. Well, it's been a dramatic weekend in politics. It's been a dramatic day in politics. The Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, he's been petitioned by various people, including Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, about whether Keir Starmer should face a Privileges Committee hearing. Now, why does that ring a bell in the back of your mind? Because Boris Johnson faced that. Do you remember Harriet Harman drew him over the coals over Partygate and all the rest of it? Because there are many people who worry that Keir Starmer has lied to Parliament. He denies that, of course, and says that he's been utterly straightforward in all that he's saying. There's so much going on here. There are Labour grandees who are coming in behind Keir Starmer. There are people like Gordon Brown and other people as well, like David Blunkett from days gone by, who are saying that Labour MPs need to support Keir Starmer. We have the political editor of The Times, Steve Swinford. He's one of the first journalists I go to for what's actually going on. Jenny Chapman, Baroness Chapman, another Labour grandee. Douglas Alexander ringing the entire Scottish Parliamentary Labour Party. They're taking the threat posed by Privileges Committee very seriously indeed, says Steve. And he says the very fact the ring round gives a clear signal the government will whip against it, so they'll tell people to vote against it. Another very, very important vote in Parliament tonight. We will reflect, but we'll give you the result of when we get it. But we'll also reflect this tomorrow in more depth, because Mark Francois is going to come on, the Shadow Defence Minister, tomorrow, and we'll look into the Northern Ireland veterans aspect of all of this. So many, many challenges for the government, to say nothing of tomorrow and what happens tomorrow. Morgan McSweeney, former Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer, well, he will be giving evidence to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. That's the one that Sir Ollie Robbins gave the evidence to last week. Emily Thornberry, Dame Emily Thornberry, is going to be putting him through his paces. And this Mandelson vetting inquiry just keeps going on. All these aspects continue to cause many, many problems for Keir Starmer. And let's remember, it's only next week that there are the local elections. So lots to think about in all of this. Let's hear from the Speaker to find out what Sir Lindsay Hoyle said today in the House of Commons.
Numerous honourable and right honourable members from across the House have written to ask me to give precedence to a matter as an issue of privilege. The matter concerns the Prime Minister's answers to the House about the process for the appointment of Peter Mandelson and related issues. In this case, having taken advice, I have decided to allow the House to come to a view on whether the Committee of Privileges should look at the matter. It is not for me to make any decision or view. Therefore, the Leader of the Opposition will have the opportunity to put the matter to the House tomorrow.
So that will happen tomorrow in the House of Commons. This is going to be a crucial vote for Keir Starmer. I think he'll be fine. I think he will get through it okay, but we'll get an expert view in just a second. Before we do that, let's have a little look about to see what Darren Jones was saying today. He is, of course, Keir Starmer's representative on earth. He is Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, and he was speaking during an urgent question in the House of Commons today on the Mandelson issue. This just keeps rumbling on. This is what Darren Jones said.
The Government is very grateful to the Intelligence and Security Committee for their constructive engagement in this process, which we recognise has constituted significant additional work on top of their existing responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that by the end of today, the Cabinet Office will have passed to the Intelligence and Security Committee all of the material it has processed as part of the humble address and judged to be prejudicial to national security or international relations. This has amounted to over 300 individual documents. It includes a number that are relevant to the processes of Peter Mandelson's security vetting too. As I mentioned earlier, I am very grateful to the Intelligence and Security Committee for the important role they continue to play in the humble address process and for the speed with which they are processing these documents.
The Prime Minister himself has been speaking to Sky News. He has said that the Iran war could hit what British people buy in supermarkets and where they go on holiday. He's also talked about holidays in jeopardy. He says we'll see how long the conflict goes on. There's just an awful lot happening for the Prime Minister at the moment, and this is just before Parliament rises on Thursday. Is it Wednesday or Thursday? I can't remember. For the recess, little recess before those local elections in England, and of course the Scottish parliamentary elections and the Welsh Assembly elections. Stephen in Bristol's been in touch, 0344 499 1000. He says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Stephen. The wheels on the bus won't go round and round because Starmer has chucked too many people under it. Well, let's get the expert view of John Rentoul, who is Chief Political Commentator at The Independent. John, it's great to talk to you this evening. Whither Keir Starmer?
Well, he's just addressed the Parliamentary Labour Party. He's addressed Labour MPs tonight, pleading with them to vote against referring him to the Privileges Committee tomorrow. As you rightly said, Peter, I agree with you. I don't think Labour MPs are self-destructive enough to vote to refer him. I mean, it is quite extraordinary that the light that this sheds retrospectively on Boris Johnson, I think, is remarkable, because I cannot believe that the Tory MPs actually voted, or they were prepared to vote, to refer their own Prime Minister to the Privileges Committee in 2022. It was obviously the sort of precursor to Boris Johnson's downfall. But it's interesting that I don't think Keir Starmer's in such a bad position yet. Although
it's interesting, the vote tomorrow, apparently, this is a bit technical, of course, but nerds like you and me will understand it. If it's a free vote, as it was with Boris Johnson, MPs could do whatever they wanted, but tomorrow it looks as if it'll be a whip vote, so Labour telling its MPs how to vote and defying that and saying, no, Labour whips, I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to vote against that. That's a more serious matter and could see them suspended from the Parliamentary Labour Party. There probably won't be too many people who'll do that, John, let's face it.
Absolutely. I mean, there would have to be there'd have to be 80 or so doing that, and that is coincidentally the number who could trigger a leadership election. So I don't think we're in that territory yet. This stuff about a free vote, of course, was made up by the Tories last time in order to excuse their embarrassment.
Yes, because so many were going to vote for Boris Johnson to go. He was losing so much support at the time, wasn't he?
Yes, exactly. What they meant was that they couldn't whip successfully because there were too many Tory MPs who were prepared to vote against their own Prime Minister. As I say, I don't think Keir Starmer is in such a bad position yet, although he's obviously heading in that direction.
Morgan McSweeney, the former Chief of Staff to Keir Starmer, giving evidence tomorrow morning. Just to say to viewers and listeners, I'm actually going to be on with Julia Hartley-Brewer at 11:30 to react to the first half an hour of his evidence. I'll be on with Julia tomorrow morning I mean, what are your thoughts on that and how difficult that could be, especially as there are definitely different people saying different things, shall we say, charitably, John?
Well, I would have thought that Morgan McSweeney is going to try to be as helpful as he can to Keir Starmer. I mean, I don't think he is in a state of opposition to the Prime Minister yet. I mean, obviously there was some tension between them, which is why he left. But that was essentially Morgan McSweeney taking the rap for the Peter Mandelson business. I mean, as your viewer said, how many more people Keir Starmer can throw under the bus for over the Mandelson affair is an interesting question. At some point, he's going to have to take responsibility himself. But no, it's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch Morgan McSweeney. Most people have never heard him speak. I personally have only rarely heard him speak. He was a very powerful person at the heart of government for the first year and a half of Keir Starmer's administration.
Yes, certainly. We also have evidence from another senior civil servant. What do you make of the role of Dame Emily Thornberry here in all of this? I expect Keir Starmer was thinking, she used to be in his shadow cabinet. Then when it came to the crunch, he instead made Richard Hermer, his friend, a lord and put him in as Attorney General. If he just put Emily Thornberry in, well, maybe he'd be facing the same thing from another MP, but she certainly seems to be taking some delight in getting her own back to some degree anyway on Keir Starmer, and perhaps on Peter Mandelson too. She's never been a big fan of his.
No, I mean she's a fearsome operator, and I think Keir Starmer must be wondering sometimes as to whether he made the right decision to drop her and to create an enemy on the Labour backbenches. She is a very, very good committee chair. She's great theatre. She attracts a big audience on TV. She knows how to cross-examine her witnesses, and she makes sure she gets big box office witnesses in front of her, because she had Ollie Robbins in front of her, and then she's going to have Philip Barton and Morgan McSweeney tomorrow.
And just to say, Philip Barton, of course, a former head of the Foreign Office as well, so it'll be very interesting to see what he has to say about all of that. It was interesting, there was a journalist, Tim Stanley from the Daily Telegraph, who I think it was, I'm quoting him correctly, he had a brilliant tweet last week when we saw Ollie Robbins' evidence, where he said Emily Thornberry has just the right combination of authority and camp to do the parliamentary process well.
Indeed, got it in one. And she's actually just got a letter out of the Foreign Office tonight, which I didn't have time to read completely before I came on, from Ian Collard, who is the head of the security vetting, or the head of the Foreign Office's security department, who is also involved in the Peter Mandelson thing. And it seems he didn't see Peter Mandelson's vetting file either. He was given an oral report, so the plot thickens.
Yes, very, very good point. John, just before you go, I wonder that there used to be a time when I was no stranger to the bars of Westminster. I stopped drinking about eight years ago, but some people can handle it. I couldn't, but I know there are many, many journalists who can handle it absolutely fine. But Hannah Spencer, who is the Green Party MP, has said something kind of curious and interesting. I expect you've seen this today, John, but we'll play it for our viewers and listeners just on her views on MPs voting when they've perhaps had a bevy or two. This is what she told the Politics Joe website.
I'm really uneasy about, and I noticed this the other day, when you can smell the alcohol when people are in between votes, and as everyone's going in to vote, some people have been drinking in between. Like, there's a room where I walked past and I doubled back and looked in because people are just sat having a drink. But again, that's a job. Like, I can't imagine if a cleaner did that, or someone working in a bank, like had a few drinks and then went back to work, like a bit, like smelling of alcohol, like that wouldn't happen. And I think there's been so many cases recently of like questionable and dangerous behaviour from, allegedly from MPs, but staff, like, because this culture of a really unprofessional and worrying setting where people can just drink alcohol.
What do you make of this, John?
Brilliant populist strike by Hannah Spencer, who's proving to be quite a star in the Green firmament. Actually, I mean her victory speech at her by-election was really remarkable, because it had absolutely nothing to do with anything with the environment at all.
Or much to do with Gorton and Denton, actually.
Indeed, it was just all about how difficult life is for people in Britain today, which is absolutely true. But I'm not sure the Green Party's got the answers to it. But going for this kind of populist line about MPs drinking is it's a fairly easy target.
But then again, YouGov, the polling company, asked people in a snap poll, do you think it's acceptable or unacceptable for MPs to drink alcohol on evenings where later on they will have late night votes in Parliament? Completely unacceptable, said 52% of people.
Well, yeah.
Somewhat unacceptable, 24% of people.
Yeah, no, I mean, the British people would want to ban anything. You ask them what they want, if
back to the thick of it, John. Where
I remember during coronavirus, they wanted to ban nightclubs. In the thick of it, in that documentary about the job I used to do, masquerading as a comedy series in the BBC, there was a bit where a minister complains about how much money he earns and says it's not enough, and Malcolm Tucker, the main character in it, says the public want you to live in a cave and eat grass. Yeah, absolutely. I'm afraid that is British public opinion. It is very censorious, but
should they be voting on matters of state? Should they be voting on laws if they're drunk?
No, of course they shouldn't. But, parliamentary hours are incredibly long, even after the reforms that the Blair government brought in, so that we don't have these all-night sessions anymore. But no, they shouldn't be. But I think it's obviously puritanical to insist that people can't drink of an evening. I mean, there aren't that many votes that are that late these days on the parliamentary timetable. So I think Hannah Spencer's engaged in a bit of low politics.
Okay, John, will continue to debate that throughout the programme. Thank you. That's John Rentoul there, who's chief political commentator at The Independent. What do you think about that? Should MPs be allowed to vote when they've had a few bevies? 0344 499 1000, whether you ring me for a voice call, whether you send me a WhatsApp text message on that number, or send me a voice note as well. We'll play out those voice notes right throughout the programme. Just send them in. Dead easy to do so, and we'll get your opinions on the air. Phil in Portsmouth said, I'm in no way sticking up for the Green Party, but that Hannah Spencer does kind of have a point about drinking at Westminster, says Phil. Not the smell that just makes her an idiot, but it is the MP's job to look after the country, even if it is up to an 18-hour-a-day job. You wouldn't find the NHS or police having a drink during their lunch break. I can't believe I just texted this, because I finished a 9.5-hour shift and I've just had a beer. Ha ha, says Phil. Well, Phil, I think after a 9.5-hour shift you probably deserve that beer, but you're not making decisions about the future of the country while having had that beer, which you're perfectly entitled to. And I'm one of those people. I mean, I gave up drinking 8 years ago, as I said a minute ago, but I'm not a Puritan. I'm not someone who says you can't have a drink, but should you be having it if you're just hanging around for these votes late at night? Becca says, if Starmer has nothing to worry about, why is it that he threatened the whip? It should be a free vote. Penny in Essex says, good to have you back, thank you. Starmer must go, Peter, but most people think he'll worm his way out of it. Everyone we speak to says he has to go. If he doesn't go after the May elections, we're absolutely doomed. Penny, very, very interesting one. And actually, I think it was the Daily Mail today. Really, really interesting article. A journalist there, very good journalist called Guy Adams, was in Wales, where Labour are under a lot of pressure. They've been in power since devolution came into Wales in 1999, so that's 27 years. It's looking pretty bad for them in the Welsh elections at the moment, which are happening, of course, on the 7th of May. We'll see what happens there. Plaid Cymru doing pretty well, Reform UK doing pretty well, Conservatives less well in the opinion polls, but we'll see what happens. The point of that is that Guy Adams knocked over 100 doors on a place called Keir Hardie Terrace, so Keir Hardie rather than Keir Starmer, to find someone who would have anything nice to say about Keir Starmer, and he knocked over 100 doors before anybody did that, which is a very interesting journalistic exercise and a very interesting article in the Mail today. Dawn in Chancellor says, you know it's all over for Starmer when Gordon Brown supports him. Remember, they had to force Brown out of number 10 when he lost the election. Margaret says, is it worth having this privileges inquiry? The whips will have a quiet word. Of course they will. And once again, Starmer will still be there, says Margaret, who inquires whether my friend had a perfect companion. I tweeted about this, a friend of mine getting a rescue cat, #adopt don't shop. And yes, they're going to adopt the cat, Margaret. So I full updates on Twitter about that as that goes on. Alex says, so happy to have you back. Thank you very much indeed. That's a really lovely message from Alex. Mike says, Hannah Spencer needs to walk through the City of London or Canary Wharf on a Friday lunchtime. Every pub full to the rafters, spilling out of the street with bankers. Shut up, Hannah. Another person says, oh, go away, Hannah Spencer. Winston Churchill was tanked up on whiskey and won World War II, whiskey and cigars, and one of the best PMs of all time. Yes, I mean, Hitler was teetotal and banned fox hunting, so this is definitely a debate I think is worth having. One more, actually, before the break, from Matthew. He says, Hannah Spencer is troubled by members of the House having a tipple, but at the same time supports the legalisation of crack, heroin, weed, etc. Make it make sense. Matthew, I can't make it make sense, especially as they say, the Green Party say they want to legalise all drugs. Does that include date rape drugs? I'd love to ask them, but they won't come on my programme at the moment. Anyway, we'll see if that changes. Lots to discuss. We'll go live to the debate desk. Andy Twelves will be with us, as will Joe Wheeler. Political commentators both stay with us here on Talk.
Sent us a picture that made me feel so ashamed. We look like hoarders.
Chris Marshall!
Yeah, I'm actually recovering from an accident right now.
You've landed loose today, haven't you?
Yeah, don't shake the arm, Chris, too much.
Emma!
You're with Danny Boyle, who's like the maddest director ever. He's got so much energy. He's like you.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Lenny in Ashford, who says, I believe miracles do happen in politics. Is it possible they have found someone Starmer has not lied to? Well, certainly Keir Starmer says he's not a liar, but that's part of what they're debating in Parliament tomorrow. Amy says, does the fact Labour MPs are being whipped to vote, told how to vote essentially, against this Privileges Committee motion, does that not show how desperate things are becoming for Starmer? Because surely if a large number of MPs voted for the motion, he wouldn't sack them and reduce his majority. Well, let's hear what Adrian has to say about this. He sent me a voice note.
The whole country can see Keir Starmer has lied. He said that Sir Ollie Robbins said one thing, and everyone saw the evidence and sees that he didn't say that. He is reported to a committee to review his conduct, but he tells the Labour MPs that they're not allowed to vote for this to go through. So basically, he is preventing any independent review of his words. And this is a man who says he is the most moral MP in Christendom. If that is my summary, then the whole bloody lot needs to go.
Adrian, thanks for your thoughts on that. Keep sending your voice notes in 0344 499 1000. Just before we go to the debate desk, let's just remind ourselves what the Speaker has been saying about this. This is Sir Lindsay Hoyle.
Numerous honourable and right honourable members from across the House have written to ask me to give precedence to a matter as an issue of privilege. The matter concerns the Prime Minister's answers to the House about the process for the appointment of Peter Mandelson and related issues. In this case, having taken advice, I have decided to allow the House to come to a view on whether the Committee of Privileges should look at the matter. It is not for me to make any decision or view. Therefore, the Leader of the Opposition will have the opportunity to put the matter to the House tomorrow.
That was the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Let's go to the debate desk. I'm delighted Joe Wheeler is back. Hello, Joe. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you. And you?
Very well, thank you. And Andy Twelves is with us. Lovely to see you. Political commentators both. Andy looking pretty hirsute there with the beard. There was quite a controversy over the weekend. I had let my beard grow or my stubble grow for 7 days. Lots of people on Twitter saying no. Bad idea.
I saw that on Twitter. I thought you looked very good. I thought it looked lovely.
You're very well. You're unhuman. How long is this beard taking you to grow?
I think it's about 2 weeks worth.
Oh, well, I mean, that's quite impressive, isn't it? Yeah, pretty impressive.
It is.
There we are. Right then, let's talk about Starmer under pressure. Andy, what is your view on this?
I think that him whipping MPs for it not to go to the Privileges Committee is a sign of weakness, to be honest. I hear that right now, actually, he's had a very successful parliamentary Labour Party meeting.
Yeah, so he's been speaking to all the MPs, over 400 of them, from about 6 o'clock this evening, and bits of that coming out in the media, and I'm sure you've been speaking to Labour insiders as well about that. What have they been saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sky Rigby put it on Twitter that one Labour MP had said that they were more annoyed than mutinous, which isn't really great for people wanting to see Keir Starmer out of number 10. It seems that, you know, the Labour MPs don't want to get rid of their leader before the crucial local elections that are coming up, because it wouldn't be very sensible to go into those local elections without a party leader. I think that taking it to the Privileges Committee won't achieve anything right now, especially because we've got Philip Barton, the former Foreign Office Permanent Under-Secretary, tomorrow, and Morgan McSweeney, the former Chief of Staff, going to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee tomorrow, and then in a couple of weeks from now, the full release of the Morgan McSweeney, Peter Mandelson vetting files.
That'll all come out after the local elections as well, yes.
So, you know, we don't actually... Us and MPs don't have the full information, so I don't think rushing it to the Privileges Committee right now is the right decision for, you know, both the taxpayers to have to fund an inquiry and also for MPs.
Yeah, and it has been confirmed in the last few minutes that Labour MPs will be told how to vote. In that, it had been speculation until now, but it has now been confirmed. Joe, is that the right strategy, or should they be allowed to do what they want?
Well, I think timing is all over this, because having to face these calls for an investigation, really, really bad news at this time, because nobody else wants to take over his role. You know, ahead of the elections in May, nobody in their right mind would want to take over this role.
And that is just a few days away.
Yes.
You don't want a Labour leadership contest. Are they holding their nose and saying, let's get through this and see what happens after that, perhaps?
Absolutely. I think Starmer knows he's gone. I genuinely do.
Do you agree with that, Andy? Sorry to interrupt you. Do you agree Starmer knows he's gone?
I don't think he will go right now, to be honest. I think he knows that his faction, quote-unquote, the Labour First, Labour Right faction, are the best organised. The soft left aren't set on a candidate. Angela Rayner can't do it until her tax affairs are over. Ed Miliband would probably be quite a good candidate, but he doesn't want to do it, I think, is the issue.
What the Labour people I've been talking to say about Ed Miliband is that he wants to be a chancellor, a sort of Brown-type chancellor, to say, give me control of the sort of... domestic affairs, and then have a Prime Minister, but apparently he'll be the kingmaker. I mean, do you relish Ed Miliband in control of the finances of this country?
Absolutely not. I mean, that would be absolutely horrendous. But the question is, who is there? And whoever there might be, I mean, if there's somebody back in the shadows about to come forward and say, yes, I'd like to do it, as I say, before the May elections, no, it's a poisoned chalice. There is every good chance that Labour may get slaughtered in these elections, and you know that would be really bad news. Starmer has to know that he's virtually gone. Have we not got the Ukrainian trial about to start?
Well, that's something that it's actually happening in court at the moment, so we'll cover that, of course, when we get more evidence and when that all comes out. So we'll talk about this. It's about the firebombing of his family home. Just to say that Zia Youssef, who's the chairman, of course, of Reform UK, a couple of hours ago, he said, friendly note to Labour MPs ahead of the vote tomorrow to decide if Starmer should face an ethics probe. If you vote against it, Reform will carpet bomb your constituency to ensure all your constituents know you voted to save the most unpopular PM of all time. Vote wisely, said Zia Youssef. So threats already from Zia Youssef. Do you think they're credible? I mean, obviously he's talking in a metaphorical way. He's not actually going to carpet bomb anybody.
Well, no, and it does sound like a threat. And I don't like that from any political party. You know, the whole point of a political party is it's a body that I want to vote for. I believe in what they're doing, and I believe in what
they're saying. Should be a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Start giving me that negativity, and it's like, no, back off, mate. Yeah, I'm not interested in that.
Well, that's an interesting point for opposition parties. Andy, as someone who's broadly a Labour supporter, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. Should, if you were an opposition party, would you say, let's just let Starmer fail, let's just let him burn out, essentially, or actually does it take Kemi Badenoch or Nigel Farage or Zia Youssef or whoever to punch that bruise and to make sure that, from their perspective anyway, that these local elections, for example, go very badly for him?
Well, I suppose that's really what Keir Starmer did in opposition, actually, when it was Boris Johnson and Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, just letting the Tories implode and destroy themselves in government. And, you know, pretty successful strategy considering he got, you know, a majority of, 411 MPs. So, you know, I think there is some merit in that. But of course, you know, Kemi, I actually think, you know, even as a paid up Labour Party member, I think she's doing a pretty good job as leader of the opposition right now. You know, with the humble address, I think she's actually doing her constitutional role as leader of the opposition.
She is actually opposing
really well.
Yes.
And I think, you know, it's just stuff like that of what I want a government to be held to account on. You know, about vetting, about whether we put a nutter in as US ambassador. I want the leader of the opposition to get to the bottom of that. So I think that it's a give and take. But I think, you know, Zia Youssef, he's, you know, pretends to be Shadow Home Secretary. He's the Home Affairs spokesman of Reform UK. He's an unelected bureaucrat of Reform. He's never been elected anywhere. He bought access into Reform UK by giving them loads of donations. Still, I mean,
Reform UK are another poll out today, 27% of the vote. If there was an election tomorrow and Zia Youssef were to stand for Reform UK, he would be an MP tomorrow. He's not at the moment. They're a small party. They've only got 5 MPs. But, I mean, he is a senior figure there.
I mean, yeah, because he bought access. He was just a donor.
I'm sure Zia Youssef would deny buying access. That's something that he would take great issue with.
He was a donor and then he was made chairman and then was head of policy and now a Shadow Home spokesperson.
Nigel Farage, I'm sure, would say that Zia Youssef is a very, very effective campaigner and someone who he wants to be chairman of his party. Aside from that, and just leaving that to one side, he's opposing too, isn't he?
Nigel Farage.
Yeah. I would say Zia Youssef and Nigel Farage. What do you make of what Zia Youssef said on Twitter there?
I think it's just ridiculous. I think, you know, we look at the Reform UK councils that were elected last year at the last May elections. They've not done the radical change that they promised. You know, Farage and Reform UK more broadly promised to cut the taxes. Now they're saying, oh, well, we've got the lowest average tax increase at a council level. And I think a lot of it is, you know, if it's, you know, a local council, can you really change the impact of who the US ambassador is? You know, this national stuff just actually isn't relevant to local residents.
Isn't it always the case, Joe, that in a local election, this is the time where the main governing party often gets a bloody nose, and people may not be thinking about their potholes or their bin collections. They might think, actually, I maybe have voted Labour previously, but I'm not going to because, you know, I don't like Keir Starmer, or whatever their view is on any party leader.
I think that there are bigger things to consider than potholes and bin collections, however important they are to the population at this time, and they are, particularly in places like Birmingham where they haven't really had very many. But at the moment, the entire situation is cataclysmic. I mean, this whole situation over Mandelson is beyond farcical. Literally, it's got to the stage where we watch something in the evening and go, we need some humour, let's watch, you know, Parliament. Let's watch some politics.
Well, I'm getting up tomorrow morning voluntarily to watch Morgan McSweeney, but that's just because I'm a nerd. Dan in Kent has been in touch and says, evening Cardi B, evening Dan. Weirdly, I do believe Starmer on this one, but it has shone a light on the sheer incompetency of the man. He and the cabinet lost the trust of people right at the start when they took freebies. It's hypocrisy, and it's very bad from a Labour government. And since then, it's just U-turn after U-turn. I believe Starmer has been like a rabbit in the headlights for some time now and simply ignored the red flags of Mandelson because he trusted judgment around him rather than his own. Unfortunately, that is no good for the leader of the United Kingdom. So slightly different view from Dan there. Lots on Hannah Spencer, the Green Party MP. We're going to talk about this with Andy and Joe in a few minutes' time about whether MPs should be allowed to drink and have a drink in the bars of Parliament before voting. Certainly, Kerry says Hannah Spencer might have a point, but the Greens want to legalise all drugs, so it doesn't really cut the mustard. And Steve in Hayward Heath says it's rich of Hannah Spencer complaining about alcohol when her party proposes to legalise cocaine and other drugs. Would it be okay for her to vote while in a drug-induced stupor, says Steve. And Adrian Baird in Buckhurst Hill says, given the residues of white powder found widely in the Palace of Westminster, would Hannah ban spliffs and cocaine? Well, the Green Party policy is to legalise all drugs. including the use of things like date rape drugs, which is something I am very, very worried about. Patrick in Nottingham says, I totally agree, no alcohol during working hours. I love a drink, but I would never drink alcohol during my working day, which is between 9 and 12 hours, 6 days a week. Being an electrician, that would cause a lot of problems. It's really interesting Patrick mentions that, because I was in a careers, I was 13 years old. This guy came into my school in Northern Ireland and said, right, can anybody think of a job that it would be more difficult to do if you were colourblind? 30 hands went up, 29 of them were about to say electrician. He picked me and I said, bomb disposal expert. He said, yes, that would be tricky if you were colourblind. We'll talk about Trump and the King's visit next. We'll also talk about Hannah Spencer before the top of the hour. We're going to stay on the debate desk with Joe and with Andy. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
The King and Queen have just landed in America. They're on the state visit. This is a big and pretty fraught visit to America. We know, of course, Donald Trump has had 2 state visits to this country, but just in the last few minutes, Charles and Camilla have arrived in the US and they have landed in Washington, D.C. They're going to be greeted very shortly in the next few minutes by President Donald Trump at the White House and First Lady Melania Trump as well. The palace has said the programme is going to go ahead as planned. Further security talks have taken place after that gunman gained access to the event attended by Trump on Saturday. We're going to be speaking to someone who was there, a journalist who was there. We're going to be speaking to her later on in the programme. It's actually the first time, believe it or not, a reigning monarch has travelled to the US in nearly 20 years. Queen Elizabeth II last visited in 2007. Well, given those dramatic developments over the weekend and the fact that this is happening right now, given the fact that the special relationship is apparently maybe not quite so special, what do we think about this? What do you think about this at home? 0344 499 1000. Let's find out what the debate desk panellists think. Firstly, Andy, 12s.
I think that it's a really important, Donald Trump is one of the biggest Anglophile presidents I think that we've ever had, certainly this century. And when there's been such negative discourse between the Prime Minister and the President over Iran, over the Chagos deal, over whatever, King Charles is really our greatest diplomatic tool. So I think it's actually extraordinary extraordinarily well timed that he goes over, because they were pen pals when Donald Trump was out of office those 4 years that President Biden was in the White House. So they clearly have an affinity and a friendship for each other. So I think it is actually extremely well timed considering everything that's gone on. Especially, I think the US said they were briefing they were going to reconsider their position on the Falkland Islands, which is the last thing that we want right now, especially with the Royal Navy in the state that it is. So yeah, I think it's extremely positive.
How difficult is this one for Charles? Clearly there'll be a few people worrying about those kind of conversations going on, that Trump might say something that might raise the hackles or just be controversial.
Well, I think the overall situation of security is a slight issue. I mean, this man, Cole Allen, arrested uninjured after this exchange of gunfire with Secret Service agents, had mocked the insane security lapses that enabled him to bring in 2 guns, ammunition and knives to a room in the Washington Hilton Hotel without his luggage being screened. So that was the President of the United States. What kind of security is that? Now, obviously, King Charles and Queen Camilla will also be travelling with a good deal of security, hopefully their own, in which they have more confidence. Back in 1994, Charles was shot at while in stage in Australia. And at that point, his reaction was understated. He readjusted his cufflinks, blinked a few times, and watched as security bundled people to the floor. I genuinely don't know. I mean, if I were going to make that kind of trip anywhere, doesn't matter where to, yeah, I would want to know that my security was as good as it could be. And what we're hearing, first of all, about Trump's security doesn't seem to give much reassurance.
What do you think, Andy, of what Joe said there?
Yeah, I mean, I assume they have different protection. I think the Secret Service will probably have a liaison with, is it the Metropolitan Police?
It will be. Branch? It is the Royalty and Specialist Protection branch of the Metropolitan Police. I actually worked with them when I was a special advisor. They looked after 2 of my ministers, the Northern Ireland Secretary and the Home Secretary. They're a very, very dedicated bunch of people, and they go everywhere right around the world. It depends on the different areas where they can and can't carry guns. I would imagine in the United States there's no problem with that, certainly, but I'm sure all of that will have been reviewed in light of what happened on Saturday night.
Yeah, especially, I think
reviewed, but how fast? Well, what are they going to do?
Well, it's just insane that, like you said, they managed to get 2 guns through. 2 guns through. That is just insane.
Into a room with the President of the United States. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, I believe one of them was a shotgun. I mean, how do you get a shotgun into a room? Any room? I couldn't walk into, your average nightclub with a shotgun without being noticed. And he managed to come in without any screening whatsoever.
Then again, you could walk into any nightclub and you'd be noticed anyway, Joe.
Yes, because I'm about 90 years too old.
Shut up. Well, let's certainly remember that a bit later on in the programme we're going to have an interview with someone who was there in that room. There were about 2,000 journalists there at the press corps evening, that the press corps dinner that they have every year. So we'll talk about that as well a little bit later on. But we know that a visit has been adjusted, the security has been looked at again, and Trump has hailed King Charles as brave for visiting the US after the shooting. We'll come back to the debate desk in just a second, but I just want to read out a couple of messages. Andrew in Salisbury says Hannah Spencer doesn't like the drinking scene at the Palace of Westminster, but she fully supports legalising all drugs. Do you know what? Let's just get into this now, actually, with the debate desk panel. Let's just remind ourselves what Hannah Spencer said on drinking in Parliament. She spoke to politicsjoe.com. She's the Green MP for Gorton and Denton, and we'll just remind ourselves what she had to say about this.
I'm really uneasy about, and I noticed this the other day, when you can smell the alcohol when people are in between votes, and as everyone's going in to vote, some people have been drinking in between. Like, there's a room where I walked past and I doubled back and looked in because people are just sat having a drink. But again, that's a job. Like, I can't imagine if a cleaner did that, or someone working in a bank, like, had a few drinks and then went back to work, like a bit, like smelling of alcohol, like that wouldn't happen. And I think there's been so many cases recently of like questionable and dangerous behaviour from, allegedly from MPs, but staff, like, because this culture of a really unprofessional and worrying setting where people can just drink alcohol.
Loads of people getting in touch on this. Simon in Manningtree says, in regards to Hannah Spencer, what represents the worst communication barrier? MPs casting a vote when they've had a few drinks, or running a campaign in a language the majority of people in this country don't understand. Very interesting one from Simon there. Tonya says, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I agree with Hannah Spencer. Her party wants to regulate drugs. That's irrelevant to this argument. The majority of people can't drink at work, and we have less responsible rules. They're representing constituents and making decisions that affect the country. They should not be drinking on the job. Well, Andy, what do you make of this?
So this was with, Politics Joe's Eva Santina's interview. I was actually on the podcast with her this morning talking about this.
Okay.
And
Eva Santina Evans there, the journalist who did this interview with Hannah Spencer there. Yeah.
And I think... I think YouGov did a snap poll, didn't they? Like 70...
They did. I have it in front of me here. Do you think it is acceptable or unacceptable for MPs to drink alcohol on evenings where later on they will have late night votes in Parliament? Completely unacceptable, 52%. Somewhat unacceptable, 24%. Somewhat acceptable, 11%. Completely acceptable, 4%. Don't know, 9%. So, I mean, you've got 76% of people saying completely or somewhat unacceptable. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, she seems in step with the kind of public mood here. I think there's a middle ground here. I think that I think if you're working until 10, 11 o'clock at night, as some nights in Parliament do go on to, and you've got a gap of 3 hours, there's nothing wrong with nipping in, getting a couple of pints, across 2 or 3 hours with your staffers, with a journalist, with, a constituent that's visiting you. I think that's okay. But there is a line, and there are quite a few MPs of, a few different parties that do cross that line, that, go around really quite sloshed, not just on these late nights, but, in the afternoon, into the early evening when there aren't late votes. So I think
I've seen it. I've been around Parliament. I know you have as well. I've seen it a lot, and I was part of that drinking culture for a long time, and there was so much alcohol in that world that's why I stopped drinking. I was just drinking too much because a lot of it was events where it was free, a lot of it was subsidised in Parliament, for example, and it was just it was a really good idea to stop. Anyway, Joe, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm actually going to surprise myself here and say no, actually I don't think it is acceptable, particularly where it's a late night vote. But after any period, if you walk into a building with a view on something and think, okay, this is what I think, this is the way I'm going to vote, but then over the course of the next few hours, you not only start talking to people who you might like or respect, or members of your party, or maybe members of another party, but within that you're also giving it a bit of this. Yeah, your resolve will soften. It will definitely soften. Even if you were quite belligerent in the first place, yes, your attitude will think, okay, I hear what you're saying, and how far does it have to go before you actually do a volte face and say, no, actually, I'm going to agree with you?
Joe, you and I have been around journalism for some time, and I think what I've seen, even in the 20 years I've been in journalism, is a big, big change from people who had long liquid lunches, what Nigel Farage calls a PFL, a proper flipping lunch, and the last... Well, I know there are bits in finance, and there are lots of various parts of the city and so on where that continues, but really, from what I'm familiar with, Parliament is one of those last places where it is acceptable to drink at lunch, drink in the evenings, make decisions, go into vote. And some MPs don't even know what they're voting for. Their whips just tell them how to vote in certain ways. There are lots of different votes and so on. So they may not even know, sober or not sober, what they're actually voting for. But journalism has changed a lot. And actually, it was Nick Robinson, the Today programme presenter, he talked recently about having lunch with MPs, said they only have an hour, they want mineral water and all the rest. But he talked about having a lunch with, I think it was Mingus Campbell from the Lib Dems that lasted 7 hours. Things have changed a lot. They've changed in our profession. They've changed in society in general. Why is Parliament the last bit where it's okay?
Possibly because they can. It's as simple as that. If you are able to do it, and like I say, if you're talking about a late night vote, I mean, most of us go in, we do a day's work. If we're following a story, we're excited about it as a journalist. Obviously going back to things that have happened in my past, whether it's Weather or Madeleine McCann or whatever, if you're on that story, you're glued to it. And you are very, very focused. But if you are literally sitting around waiting to take a vote on something that maybe you don't even really care about, the temptation to have a couple of drinks is going to be huge.
Especially when it's in your workplace. You don't even have to leave the parliamentary estate. We'll come back to this. In fact, I think we'll maybe take a call on this after the break with Andy and with Joe. But just before we do, I just want to play a quick clip from Caroline Levitt. She is, of course, the White House press secretary, just talking about where things stand right now. We're going to talk to someone who's at that dinner where that dreadful attack happened. Thankfully, everybody was okay, apart from, of course, the Secret Service person who was shot, although he had a bulletproof vest on. Let's just hear what Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, has been saying in the last little while.
This is the third major assassination attempt against President Trump in 2 years. No other president in history has faced such repeated, serious attempts on his life. First and foremost, the President, the First Lady, and everyone in this White House are extraordinarily grateful to the brave law enforcement professionals who sprang into action to apprehend the would-be assassin and keep all of us safe.
Caroline Levitt there speaking at the White House. We'll come back to what's happening in America. We'll talk as well about Hannah Spencer, the Green Party MP, who says politicians should not be drinking on the job. But she's the one who wants to legalise all drugs. Plenty more to discuss on the debate desk with Joe and Andy. And get your comments into 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Incredible.
Olivia Moore!
And they sent us a picture that made me feel so ashamed. We look like hoarders.
Chris Marshall!
Yeah, I'm actually recovering from an accident right now.
You've landed loose today, haven't you?
Yeah, don't shake the arm, Chris, too much.
You're with Danny Boyle, who's like the maddest director ever. He's got so much energy. He's like you.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
At Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, the King and Queen have arrived. They've been greeted by the Trumps. I think we can see a little bit of the live footage. The American anthem, I think, perhaps even the UK anthem, is being played. Let's see if we can we hear. We don't have audio on that just at the moment, but we can see that there are various people there who are, including the King and Queen. We've got that footage on the screen right now. And there are people saluting, lots of military officers there. Of course, the King's trip to America starting that state visit, and we will bring you all of that. We'll talk about it a little bit later on in the programme. Charles and Camilla in America, the first sitting monarch there for about 20 years. And now those anthems are over, and they'll be getting into the car and heading off to the White House. There's going to be a garden reception for them. Right then, I want to speak to Michelle in Middlesex on Hannah Spencer and drinking in Parliament. We're still in the debate desk with Joe and Andy, Joe Wheeler and Andy Twelves, political commentators both. Michelle, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
I'd just like to say I think it's very bad because people go to work, they go to lunch, maybe have one little pint of lager, and then they go back to work. It just seems that they can say having one pint of lager and then you can't vote.
But it's interesting, we've had someone saying, you know, there are lots of alcohol-free things around. There's, for example, we've had an electrician being in touch, said, look, I can't even think about touching alcohol in my job. These people are making legislation for our country. Should they even be slightly impaired?
One pint of lager doesn't.
But if it's more than that, I mean, what should there be limits, Michelle?
Well, I'm sure that they are responsible and they would not drink more than...
Oh, they would. They absolutely would, Michelle. I've been in those bars. Fear not. Listen, stay where we are just for a second, Michelle. We'll take you down, but I'll come back to you in a second, I promise you. Let's get reaction to what Michelle has said there. First from Andy, then from Joe.
Yeah, I think it often does go beyond just one pint of lager at lunch. You know, I'm a fiend for a pint of lager at lunch, I must admit, but, you know, I'm not an MP. I think often, you know, we've heard a lot from MPs in reaction to this interview. I think it, you know, got, what, 6-7 million views on Twitter, that clip from Hannah Spencer. We haven't heard a lot from staff who are quite poorly paid. You know, they're, 21-year-olds on, 25, 26 grand a year, normally first job out of uni, aren't, earning very much at all. And if their boss takes them out for a drink, there are, a lot of questionable lines about whether a boss should be drinking with someone that young and someone that works for them. So I'd quite like to hear from a staffer or the Staffers Union talking about how they feel about MPs drinking on the job in the House of Commons, to be honest.
Joe?
Well, they're not likely to be driving, so they're going to be taking public transport home. And if you've got a massive amount of time to waste, think, talk, whatever you want to call it.
But they're telling us how we should live our lives, and they are voting on that in Parliament based on an evening where they might have been drinking.
Absolutely. I don't believe in the 1 pint of lager, sorry, no.
Let's go back to Michelle just for a second. Michelle, what's your reaction to what Joe and Andy have said there?
Oh, well, I don't know. It's very difficult, But what about legalising cannabis, heroin and everything else?
I think that's completely wrong. What do you think, Michelle?
Totally. Yeah.
So does Hannah Spencer have any moral authority then if she's talking about legalising all these drugs?
I think she's talking out of her backside.
Okay. Michelle, listen, thank you very much indeed. That's Michelle in Middlesex there with the first call of the evening. 0344 499 1000. We'll have plenty of time for calls later in the show, so get your call in now. We've only, unfortunately, about 2 minutes left in the debate desk. Joe Wheeler, where are all the teaspoons?
I don't know where the teaspoons are. They vanish when nobody knows who's got them. Just like we don't know where the odd socks go.
There is a study which has been done by professors in Edinburgh about where all the teaspoons go. I don't know about you, but teaspoons go missing all the time. I had a lodger, and for some reason I started with 8 forks. And by the time she left, I had 5 forks. No, I had 3 forks, and 5 forks had gone missing. And I said, "Have you got some forks in your room where any? It's absolutely fine. If you've misplaced one or whatever, we'll replace it. Whatever. But where are the missing teaspoons, Andy? What do you think about this?
I actually don't own any teaspoons.
You don't own any teaspoons? What?
I've got a set of the big pudding spoons that I use for everything. I use it for everything. Whether
you don't
it's
have any teaspoons?
No, because with a teaspoon's too small to get the tea bag out. You're dripping everywhere and you're making a mess. If you get one of the big pudding spoons that's like that for the viewers, I'll lift up a little bit further. You just get all of it. You get all the juice, and then.
I'm not sure how he's making...
Sorry, I'm just completely dumbfounded by this. Joe?
So a large supermarket at one point ran an offer for these teaspoons, which were really, really nice. I mean, I know it's sad to really think that a teaspoon is attractive, but I got so nervous about them. I was coming down in the middle of the night to count them in the drawer.
and
you think I'm joking?
An insight into the domestic lives of both Andy 12 and Joe Wheeler. What is your teaspoon etiquette? Have you ever stolen a teaspoon? Where do you think the teaspoons go? This is Edinburgh University academics. We're going to be speaking to one of them a little bit later on. This is a professor who we're going to be speaking to later on in the programme about where all the teaspoons have gone. I don't think they actually know, but they're certainly talking about it anyway. We're going to talk about Labour sleaze, Starmer, Mandelson, all the rest of it in a few minutes' time. In the meantime, thank you to Joe and Andy. Stay with us. Get your call in 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's just gone 8 o'clock. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company and indeed from your welcome back. Lots of people welcoming me back from being a week away. I was teaching some journalism students, also managed to grow a little bit of a beard, which is now gone, as to the relief of many. It caused quite a lot of consternation on Twitter. Anyway, the point is that there's an awful lot to talk about, including Keir Starmer, what's happening with him, and as we speak at this exact moment, there's a debate going on in Parliament about veterans in Northern Ireland. If we get the result of that between now and 10 o'clock, I will give you the result of that. But for analysis of that, we've got to analyse that, see where it goes, see how many abstentions there have been. We're going to get Mark Francois, the Shadow Defence Minister, on tomorrow night to talk about that when we know the full picture. But if we find out about veterans tonight, I will of course tell you. Speaking of veterans and Northern Ireland, we will go to Northern Ireland to talk about that car bomb attack. You might have missed it. Really frightening, terrible thing that's happened in Northern Ireland. So much of the media ignoring it. We will not ignore it. We will be talking about it. And we will also talk about Hannah Spencer, the Green MP, who says alcohol in Parliament makes her uncomfortable. Should it be banned? What do you think? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10. Stay with us here on Talk. Lots of people getting in touch. Ernie says, they say you always talk the truth when you've had a drink. Maybe a bit of Dutch courage would make politicians vote how they feel instead of voting the way they are told to, just to keep their jobs. Well, really interesting on that particular point. It is now a whipped vote. That means that Labour MPs must vote the way their party tells them to vote. They haven't got a free vote. They can't vote how they want to vote on Keir Starmer's future. We're going to talk about that in a second with Dr. Sam Power, who is a lecturer in politics at the University of Bristol. There's so much around Sleaze, Starmer, Mandelson, McSweeney giving his testimony tomorrow to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. I was going to speak to Julia about that. That's now been changed because they're going to take it live on Julia's programme. So I'll have full analysis in my programme tomorrow night from 7. So I'm not on with Julia tomorrow. But I want to talk a little bit about, firstly, about what Kemi Badenoch's been saying on the Northern Ireland Veterans Bill. This is happening in Parliament right now. They're debating it at the moment. There'll be a vote a little bit later on. And there's so much in this. This is about whether to prosecute and how a prosecution would happen of a veteran, those brave men and women, nearly 300,000 of them, the vast majority of whom served with great bravery and distinction in Northern Ireland. Not just about them, but also about Afghanistan, Iraq, what the law is now, what the law was when. Let's hear what the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, has been saying about this in Parliament today.
Labour have spent 18 months preparing legislation to hound veterans, many of them very elderly, simply for serving their country. I think that this is wrong. We want them to end this legislation. It's the reason why I'm here at a defence company meeting veterans. I'm going to be meeting more later today because this matters to us. We need to show whose side we're on. And quite frankly, I and the Conservative Party are on the side of people who fought for this country and put their lives at risk to keep us all safe. I think it is astonishing, especially at a time when there is a war on, that the government thinks the most important thing is not to publish a defence plan or show how it's going to get the money for defence. The most important thing for them is to put our veterans on the dock. Whether it is Keir Starmer or the Attorney General Richard Hermer, these men are people who are more interested in putting our soldiers in the firing line of lawfare than in making sure the country is protected. They should show us that they've got the money for defence spending and stop this nonsense bill.
Kemi Badenoch there. She was actually speaking in Basildon rather than in Parliament there. She's the Leader of the Opposition, of course. And we know that that debate is happening at the moment. As I say, if there's a vote on that before we come off air tonight, I will give you the result, and we will have full analysis tomorrow with the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, who will be with us tomorrow night, all being well. Now then, the problems for Keir Starmer continue not just on that particular bill, but of course on the Sleaze allegations, on Mandelson, Morgan McSweeney. That testimony is going to be taken live in Julia Hartley-Brewer's programme tomorrow. He's speaking from 11 o'clock to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Lindsay Hoyle, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who is the Speaker of the House of Commons, was speaking today in Parliament talking about a vote that'll happen tomorrow, more headache for Starmer, onto whether he will be sent to the Privileges Committee. Whether this Privileges Committee, of course, it caused so many problems for Boris Johnson, whether Keir Starmer could have the same treatment. Now, it'll be very interesting to see what happens. Labour MPs have been told how to vote on this already. Boris Johnson gave his MPs a free vote on it. They could vote however they want, although he was losing a lot of support at that time. But Keir Starmer has told, through his whips, through the disciplinary system, that he says that his MPs have to vote in a certain way. Let's see what Lindsay Hoyle said about this, the Speaker of the House of Commons.
Numerous honourable and right honourable members from across the House have written to ask me to give precedence to a matter as an issue of privilege. The matter concerns the Prime Minister's answers to the House about the process for the appointment of Peter Mandelson and related issues. In this case, having taken advice, I have decided to allow the House to come to a view on whether the Committee of Privileges should look at the matter. It is not for me to make any decision or view. Therefore, the Leader of the Opposition will have the opportunity to put the matter to the House tomorrow.
Well, Darren Jones, who's the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, sort of Starmer's representative on earth, he was speaking during an urgent question. These urgent questions keep coming from the opposition, keep coming from various parliamentarians trying to hold Starmer's feet to the fire. The Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister spoke in Parliament today. This is Darren Jones.
The Government is very grateful to the Intelligence and Security Committee for their constructive engagement in this process, which we recognise has constituted significant additional work on top of their existing responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that by the end of today, the Cabinet Office will have passed to the Intelligence and Security Committee all of the material it has processed as part of the humble address and judged to be prejudicial to national security or international relations. This has amounted to over 300 individual documents. It includes a number that are relevant to the processes of Peter Mandelson's security vetting too. As I mentioned earlier, I am very grateful to the Intelligence and Security Committee for the important role they continue to play in the humble address process and for the speed with which they are processing these documents.
Well, Dr. Sam Power is a lecturer in politics at the University of Bristol. He's an expert in corruption and all the different mechanisms that are there to hold politicians' feet to the fire and to try to get to the bottom of what's gone wrong, especially if they've lied, which of course Keir Starmer denies. Sam, great to have you back on the programme. What do you make of this, and how difficult is it going to be for Keir Starmer? It looks as if he's probably going to avoid this Privileges Committee hearing, but there's lots of other hearings, including Morgan McSweeney, his former Chief of Staff, the man who mysteriously lost his mobile phone, had it stolen, he says. Tomorrow he'll be speaking at 11 o'clock. Tell us your take on all of this, Sam.
Well, quite. I think it's one of those things where, you know, it's all starting to feel a little bit 2022, although that wasn't all that long ago. I mean, we're alluding to the Privileges Committee. Might not happen, but this is very much, it's feeling exactly like it did around Boris Johnson's time, and indeed the same sort of feeling of doom, despair, particularly if you're Keir Starmer, I imagine, that things can't quite go on the way that they have. And that's because we have official things that can happen in Parliament, the Privileges Committee, these votes, and you might be able to chart your path through them. But in many ways, when it comes to corruption scandals or perceptions of corruption, the problem is perception as much as these official mechanisms that we have.
You're absolutely right. When I was a special advisor, I had two mantras by which I lived my life. One was perception is reality, and the second one is you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And both of those are opposite for Keir Starmer at the moment, because there's so many problems that he is having. Can he get his authority back is a big question, especially when these probes continue. Maybe not the Privileges Committee, but certainly the Foreign Affairs Select Committee as well.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, can you get that authority back? And perhaps if you're in a relatively strong position electorally, you might be able to chart your path through. Given where Labour are at, you start to just lose lose support, lose authority. And it's quite that. It's you can't get the toothpaste back in the tube. And, you know, the court of public opinion, the court of perception is as important as anything. And given that it is as Keir Starmer himself has said in Parliament, it beggars belief that he was not told many of these things. The problem is that when things start begging belief, that you really started losing the argument, and there's only so much persuading you can do, both of your own MPs and of the public.
Well, it's the question, of course, of the Prime Minister said, I wasn't told, this is outrageous and all the rest of it. He looks out of control, and that perception is very, very difficult for him as well, Sam, isn't it? Because when Boris Johnson, when it appeared for Boris Johnson in 2022, and we had many discussions at that time, that he didn't have the grip on what was happening in his own party, in his own number 10, or perhaps even in the country too, well, that was pretty terminal for his prime ministerial period of office.
Yeah, quite. And you end up at a situation of there being no good way out of this and there being no good response, because there's one response, which is, oh, I did actually know about some of this, and then you've misled the House, and that is a grave matter. Or the other response is, I wasn't aware of this, or I didn't ask about this. And those are neither good answers either, because you either look just, you look uninterested in the matter, or it looks like you're not in control. So if you're trying to chart a course through this, if you're Keir Starmer or his advisors, you are very much in the situation of Boris Johnson all those years ago, which is, we do not have a good answer. We do not have a response to this. And when that's the answer that you have, there is no good response, that's a real problem.
Our viewers and listeners here at Talk are great people. They're often doing tough jobs, or they have other things in their life. Of course, they're looking after their kids and all the rest of it. They're maybe not as politically nerdy as you and me, Sam. And I must say, even with my nerdy hat on, and it does stay on a lot, I'm not sure I'm up to date with every single detail of this, and who knew what, where, when, and what Ian Collard said, and what Ollie Robbins said, and what Philip Barton's going to say, and Morgan McSweeney, and all these kind of names. And I think there's so much detail now. There's so many letters going around. There's so much evidence that's happened. There's so many words that have been said and written on this. Fundamentally, to me, it simply comes back to Starmer shouldn't have appointed Mandelson. The vetting was complicated and probably not done exactly the way you would have expected it to be done, and problems remain as a result of it. That's the simplest way I can express it. Given there's so much detail, given that this is kind of never ending actually, with all the different aspects of it, we know there are going to be a lot of papers that are going to be released after the local elections, for example. Will this ever go away? And actually, when it comes to corruption and that perception and the perception of power, when people kind of lose interest, actually, is that something perhaps that could be in Keir Starmer's favour?
I think it's unlikely to be in Keir Starmer's favour, because you're quite right. People do not necessarily pay attention in the way that I do, watching the Sir Ollie Robbins hearing and listening to this in detail. People actually make a pretty quick decision, which is usually pretty close to being on the money, right? If we go back to the synchronicity with Partygate, for example, people were pretty clear. There was lots of complication, but parties should not have happened in Downing Street, and people were quite angry about that. That's just about all you need to know about that affair, beyond everything else. When it comes down to Keir Starmer and Peter Mandelson, who's giving evidence when, people have made a decision, which is it was an unacceptable thing to do.
And actually, sorry to interrupt you, Sam, but within that, we're very interestingly seeing the Conservatives, again on reform as well, but mainly the Conservatives against Labour, saying things like it's one rule for them and one rule for the rest. Exactly the same language, back to perception again, that was used about Boris Johnson. Very interesting in that regard as well, when it comes with that perception aspect to it.
Yeah, well, and this just tells you something about politics as well, right? There is no one that will be enjoying this more than the Conservative Party, because Labour enjoyed it so much, or made hay when the sun shined when they were in opposition. So you very much get the same things, these things recurring. But we go back to the point. It's just more often than not, the immediate public judgment on this is quite close to being on the money. I think the public, as soon as many of these revelations came out about Peter Mandelson, and it was quite quite clear that, you know, it was in the public domain that Peter Mandelson had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, and that was known about. That just doesn't smell right to the general public, and the general public, you know, generally have a pretty good take on this. Similarly with Partygate, so we can get lost in the nerdery, as you call it, and of course I will continue to do so. But this is a pretty basic story, as Partygate was a pretty basic story.
Yes. And that's kind of part of the problem as well, because if it's a complicated big thing that a lot of people can't understand or don't care about, well, actually that's arguably less dangerous than something that is straightforward. Speaking of straightforward political arguments, I'm sure, Sam, you're familiar with Hannah Spencer, the Green Party MP, who said today about that she doesn't think people should be drinking in Parliament. Sorry to ambush you with this. I don't think we perhaps mentioned it before the programme, but what do you think about MPs drinking? Does that lead to behaviour that you would be looking at perhaps when you're looking at, maybe not corruption necessarily, but doing things that they shouldn't be doing?
So I think, you know, a drinking culture can be incredibly problematic. My understanding of what Hannah Spencer was saying was she was linking drinking to voting and perhaps shouldn't be drinking and then smelling alcohol in the lobbies. And I have a certain amount of sympathy for that. The analogy that I would draw is, you know, you have pubs on a lot of university campuses, but if a student saw me in the pub having a couple of pints just before taking a seminar, they might have cause to say, well, hang on a minute, you are just about to be teaching me. I'm not sure that this is quite the right relationship.
Yes.
So I think, you know, I do get the argument that perhaps you shouldn't be drinking and then voting. But I don't think the more general argument was to get rid of the pubs in Westminster wholesale.
And just one other thing to ambush you about. We're going to be speaking to Professor Tara Spires-Jones of Edinburgh University a little bit later on, a fellow academic to yourself. I'm sure you'll have Professor before your name before too long, Sam, and she has done a study on missing teaspoons. Have you ever stolen a teaspoon from an academic staff room?
I'm not sure I've stolen a teaspoon, but I've definitely borrowed a tablespoon to have my overnight oats in the morning, and I might not have returned it.
Oh, you might not have returned it. Oh, it's all coming out now, Sam. You talk about corruption. You talk about you pontificate on these politicians when actually you're a spoon thief.
It's one rule for me and one rule for us.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Sam, thank you. Dr. Sam Parr, who is lecturer in politics at the University of Bristol. Lots of people getting in touch about Hannah Spencer, actually. Lorraine says, while Spencer is simply troublemaking and her comments about her parliamentary colleagues will not serve for building relationships, she has cleverly managed to detract much-needed media scrutiny from the deliberate and open anti-Semitism that is rife within the party, along with dangerous ideological ideas that the Greens subscribe to. Well, certainly, Lorraine, that is something we're going to hold our feet to the fire to, both now and in the future. It was only I think it was the last show I did, actually, the Friday night a week ago, where we talked about that, and certainly there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the Green Party. I think there's a lot of entryism from Islamists as well. It's really dangerous, and Lorraine, don't worry, we're going to continue to talk about that. Sean says, in what other world other than politics can the alleged guilty party tell others that they have to vote against them being brought to book? That is a very good point from Sean. Loads of really good points coming in. And Alex in Cardiff says, I ran a cafe and heroin addicts were stealing the teaspoons. That is honestly where they all went. Joanna in Birmingham says, it's great to see you back. How did your teaching go? Thank you, Joanna. Went really well. Really good students. I'm much encouraged about the future of journalism. And Joanna says, I had a weird dream that my bus to an appointment didn't turn up. The announcement said the bus was broken due to Keir Starmer having thrown too many people under it. I think I've been watching too much news, says Joanna. For the first time in human history, I'm going to say, Joanna, tell me more about your dream. I once had a dream about Liz Truss. It was very weird. Andrea in Cornwall says, to my shame, I've only ever stolen once in my life, and yes, it was a rather attractive teaspoon. I can neither confirm nor deny whether I am in fact Andrea from Cornwall. So there we are. And Gary, talking about missing teaspoons, I had to recently buy a new cooker, and when moving it I found 4 teaspoons, a knife, a battery and some peas down the side and back. Well, that is very interesting. I hope the knife came in useful. The battery, I wonder whether it was working. The teaspoons, certainly, I suppose you could watch them, but when it came to the peas, I don't think you should be giving peas a chance on that occasion. We'll get to your calls in just a second. Stay with us.
to be incredible.
And they sent us a picture that made me feel so ashamed. We look like hoarders.
Chris Marshall!
Yeah, I'm actually recovering from an accident right now.
You've landed loose today, haven't you?
Yeah, don't shake the arm, Chris, too much.
You're with Danny Boyle, who's like the maddest director ever. He's got so much energy. He's like you.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including Simon in Durham, who says, luckily these MPs having a few jars during the day at work, nice. If I did that, I'd be sacked. But back in the 80s, early 90s, it was perfectly acceptable to have a couple of rinses at lunchtime. Bring it back, says Simon in Durham. Mark in Caerphilly says, Hannah Spencer is just trying to raise her profile. Perhaps she should concentrate on the real issues. Great show, Peter. Certainly got you talking anyway. Alex says, I may be cynical, but it's called the Green Party, but it's actually the Islamist party, and stopping drinking in Parliament is Islam stamping its foot on our Parliament, says Alex. MG in Staffordshire says, if only alcohol-free drinks and cocktails were made available, the alcohol drinking would not be an issue. Some people have to drive. Joanna says, having a glass or two of wine with their subsidised dinner is acceptable, but no drinking sessions in Parliament until they have finished for the day. Damon in Wigan says Hannah doesn't want people drinking, however more migrants and legal drug taking is all okay. What kind of politicians do we have these days? The values they have are ridiculous. Come on, concentrate on what's best for Britain and stop coming up with something to moan about. Westminster Day, my goodness, says Damon. Well, let's remind ourselves what Hannah Spencer said. She's certainly getting a debate going between you. This is the Green MP for Gorton and Denton, Hannah Spencer of the Green Party.
I'm really uneasy about, and I noticed this the other day, when you can smell the alcohol when people are in between votes, and as everyone's going in to vote, some people have been drinking in between. Like, there's a room where I walked past and I've done look back and looked in because people are just sat having a drink. But again, that's a job. Like, I can't imagine if a cleaner did that or someone working in a bank, like, had a few drinks and then went back to work, like, a bit, you know, like smelling of alcohol, like, that wouldn't happen. And I think there's been so many cases recently of, like, questionable and dangerous behaviour from, you know, allegedly from MPs, but staff, like, because this culture of a really unprofessional and worrying setting where people can just drink alcohol.
That's Hannah Spencer there, the Green Party MP. Chris in Epsom has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000 and has some thoughts on this. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
First of all, just a quickie. My mind is completely put at rest now with what Darren Jones said in the House today, because obviously he was the man that let us all know that 95% of the people coming across in boats were women and children. So
that's right. He said something very similar to that on Question Time. Remember? So when he says it, you think that's gospel. That's the Chief Secretary of the Prime Minister. He says it. It's true.
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning. He said it on Question Time. And the funny thing is, it's normally loaded to the left. And people roared at him, and he had to backtrack.
They certainly weren't happy. Well, what do you think about drinking in Parliament, Chris?
Well, Hannah Spencer obviously is not a student of history because she wants to not have drinking in the Westminster Palace. I don't know if you remember, Peter. I'm older than you. 15, 20 years ago, the Times and the Standard did an investigation into Parliament and the Palace of Westminster, and they did a chemical swab test on every toilet. and they found cocaine use on every single toilet in Parliament.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So she'll be going quite well with some of the parliamentarians.
If they want to legalise all the drugs, certainly. I mean, do you think, on a serious note, Chris, do you think it's reasonable to actually say, you've had a few drinks, is it that big a deal that you're voting on legislation, or would you ban alcohol entirely from Parliament?
No, I wouldn't ban alcohol entirely. That's just trying to capture the Islamist vote. As one of your messages you read out said.
Okay.
It's quite plainly obvious. The thing is that, you know, I drive a car, ride a motorcycle. I will have shandy if I'm driving, and I'll have one, possibly two shandies. You know, if you're sensible about things, there's always someone that's going to push the envelope, and there's always someone that's going to overstep the line, and we know about it in the past.
Yeah.
But no, you don't stop people being human. You don't stop. You don't carry on.
Well, this is it, Chris. Actually, this is a really interesting point, because most people, after their working day, although it's not after their working day, but MPs have done most of their work by about 7 o'clock. If they're waiting to 10 o'clock for a vote, they haven't a huge amount to do. Yes, they can go and answer emails and do constituency work and so on, but they've been working throughout the day, and most MPs, not all of them, but most of them do a long day. They may not work particularly hard, they might just be sitting around for a lot of meetings and so on, but at the same time they do a long day. The question is, if you've one thing to do and you know what you're going to do, you know you're going to vote yes or no to this particular vote, the question is, would you begrudge those people a pint? And what's interesting is, so many people say that politicians are not like us, they're different people, they're totally detached. What could be more straightforwardly British than having a quick drink after work?
Exactly, Peter. It's ridiculous. She's trying to elevate her profile. She's trying to, it pushes the Islamist agenda from, you know, banning alcohol in Parliament. They'll be banning alcohol I'd like to see her try and ban it in the city, because bankers obviously don't have a drink at lunchtime before they go back to their trading desks.
I mean, listen, I think this debate is going to run and run. Chris, thanks for your thoughts there. The other big topic that we're actually going to get into this more tomorrow night, and I definitely want to hear from the many veterans' families and veterans themselves who are exercised on the issue of prosecuting people who have served this country. Vast majority of people, certainly where I come from in Northern Ireland, the 300 or so thousand people who served in uniform during the Troubles, well, they served with great bravery and distinction. Some of them didn't. What should happen to them? Well, this is being debated in Parliament at the moment, and Kemi Badenoch certainly had some very strong words for the Prime Minister earlier on today. She was speaking in Basildon. Let's hear what she had to say.
Labour have spent 18 months preparing legislation to hound veterans, many of them very elderly, simply for serving their country. I think that this is wrong. We want them to end this legislation. It's the reason why I'm here at a defence company meeting veterans. I'm going to be meeting more later today, because this matters to us. We need to show whose side we're on. And quite frankly, I and the Conservative Party are on the side of people who fought for this country and put their lives at risk to keep us all safe. I think it is astonishing, especially at a time when there is a war on, that the government thinks the most important thing is not to publish a defence plan or show how it's going to get the money for defence. The most important thing for them is to put our veterans on the dock. Whether it is Keir Starmer or the Attorney General Richard Hermer, these men are people who are more interested in putting our soldiers in the firing line of lawfare than in making sure the country is protected. They should show us that they've got the money for defence spending and stop this nonsense bill.
Lots of people getting in touch on this one as well, including Joanna in Salisbury, who says, my friend is 72 years old. He was in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. At 18 years old, he did as he was ordered, but his commanding officer is long gone and won't be held to account. 18-year-olds would return from duty, make a statement of events without any caution and sign them. He saw his friends go home in body bags on occasion. 54 years later, this is unbelievable. Yet the IRA were let out of prison without completing sentences, even though they murdered people. Heather is in Girvan in South Ayrshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Heather, what do you make of this?
Welcome back, Peter. I hope you had a good time last week.
I did, thank you.
And I've got 2 points about, first of all, Donald Trump and his third attempt on his life again. And I hope I know he's okay and his wife's okay. and J.D. Vance and Pete were there.
Yeah, we're talking to someone a bit later on in the programme, Heather, actually, who was there. So we're going to talk to them in a few minutes, actually.
Beverly Turner, the presenter on, GB News, she was at the hotel when it happened.
Yeah.
And...
it was. I'm sure it was very scary for my friend works for Sky News in Washington, David Blevins. He's a brilliant correspondent. He was there as well. He got under the table. We're going to hear a lot more about that later on. But I think you have some thoughts on this aspect of veterans. On your I wonder what your thoughts on that are, Heather.
The point about veterans. My daughter's got a half brother. I've got a stepson. My son has got a stepbrother. He served in the armed forces. He served in Iraq. And now he's facing questions in the court about that. With all
is he himself facing questions about it, Heather?
I don't know about that.
But there are many veterans who are, of course,
hearing about Lord Hermer doing that to our veterans. I thought the whole idea is to protect and serve our country. When you get an order from the top, the chief in command, that's the Prime Minister or President of the United States of America, you're supposed to follow that procedure. When your number is up, you get called up. That's it. You follow their procedure. You follow the guidelines.
And you're absolutely right, Heather. And the big question, of course, is as well that sometimes the law has changed and been enacted retrospectively for things people did years ago where they were obeying the laws at the time, but that has been changed. Heather, very interesting perspective on that, and thank you for that, and all the very best to your family member there you're talking about. I don't think that person themselves is dealing with any particular allegations, but certainly there are many, many people who are in dealing with this. We are going to talk about Northern Ireland actually a little bit later on. There was a car bomb there over the weekend. You may have missed this, but occasionally, thankfully not that often, but occasionally there are certainly echoes of the past. And these dissident Republicans, they call themselves the new IRA, and they were trying to cause mayhem and murder over the weekend. We'll hear about that a little bit later on. Lots more comments coming in as well. Haley in Carshalton says, if the Starmer really believes he could win a general election, he should put his money where his mouth is and call it ASAP. Shimmy says all votes in the House of Commons should be free votes, otherwise it's not democracy. Simple as. I'm not sure it is as simple as that, actually, because I think that if you vote for a manifesto and you stand on a manifesto, if you had, for example, I'm a Labour candidate, I believe this, and you vote for someone on that manifesto, a national manifesto, and then they go against it, well, are they voting for what you voted for them to do? Penny in Essex says it's okay to have a drink at work as long as you're not inebriated and have all your wits about you. My husband was a bank manager and the bank was emptied by midday when they all went to the pub across the road. That stupid woman obviously agrees with Polanski that drugs are okay. It is madness. Mega Vegan says your caller's lackadaisical attitude to drinking alcohol, even at work, is the reason the healthy living longevity in Britain has decreased by 2 years since 2016. That's another story actually we were going to talk about with Joe Wheeler. We just didn't have time. Alcohol is poison. It is that simple. MG says the Green Party Noel needs to look at her own dress and conduct. Drinking alcohol excessively or otherwise does not even compare with being allowed to smoke a Class B drug. Talk about double standards. One day she will learn. The world is full of Noels. Let's see if such people are still in these jobs in their 50s or 60s in a world where people are here today and gone tomorrow, says MG. Well, someone who's not going anywhere, of course, is the King. He will be there until his dying day, and we wish him, of course, a long and happy and wonderful reign. He's in America at the moment. He's just touched down in Washington, well, not quite Washington DC, actually in Maryland, which is nearby, the neighbouring state to the District of Columbia, and he is there with Queen Camilla. He's on a state visit. We're going to hear about how awkward that might be and about the historical nature of this too. One of my favourite guests I ever speak to is Daniel Britton, the political and constitutional and indeed royal historian. He's coming up next, and I want your reaction to 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch about spoons. Alison says, you're lucky it is only spoons. I've had knives, forks and spoons disappear and I live alone. I hope to find them when I move one day. Nice to have you back, says Alison. Thank you for that. Graham says, I've got all the spoons, every pub, restaurant, cafe. I will take a teaspoon. I've been doing it for years. I'm not a thief. I just take spoons, says Graham. I mean, I think that is thievery, actually, Graham. I mean, I'm not sure the boys in blue are going to be coming around anytime soon, but nonetheless, perhaps not ideal. I did once steal a toilet roll from the United Nations in New York. I was in the United Nations building in New York. I'd had a few drinks and a couple of toilet rolls, and I was a student at the time, and I thought, might just take this back to my flat. I don't think I set back the cause of international diplomacy too far. Ian says the two topics, spoons and having a drink, are strangely linked with Weatherspoons, says Ian. Great chain. I'm a big fan of Tim Martin, I must say. Penny in Essex says, we've got all ours, but I reckon they're so small they'll probably get thrown away by accident, says Penny. Lots more thoughts on spoons. Do keep them coming in. Why do teaspoons go missing? We're going to find out later on in the programme. There is an academic study, got the professor involved who is there. Now then, one teaspoon you might want to steal is one from Buckingham Palace. They go missing all the time, apparently. But now would be the time to do it, because Charles is not there. Charles and Camilla are in Washington, and Daniel Britton is with me now, the political and constitutional and royal historian. Daniel, always good to have you on the show. What do you make of this visit, and what is the task ahead of King Charles?
Good evening, Peter. It's lovely to be on your new weekday show.
Thank you.
It's a huge task. He's actually going to have to do the job that really we ask the monarch to do these days, to be our top diplomat. Now, much of the time that is not so hard, but at the time now where President Trump has been so critical about the British government and the results of what we transpired in our position on Tehran and all that invasion, it's very, very difficult. He's going to have to tread a very delicate diplomatic line, but I think he can do it. He will want to do it, because if he does have a successful visit and successful talks with President Trump, which he's having tomorrow morning at the White House, tomorrow morning their time, of course, that will be a huge feather in the cap of King Charles, because he'll be doing the top job of a monarch, our principal diplomat.
We know that there have been not one but two state visits here to the UK. Charles was part of that as well, but it was the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II, who was on the throne at the time. What do we know about the relationship between King Charles and President Trump? And actually, that continued even when President Trump wasn't in office, didn't it?
Yes. They have got built up quite a close relationship. I think the enthusiasm, major enthusiasm, seems to be very much more on the president's side. I think the king treats all his opposite numbers roughly the same, but what he likes to do is have a very personal relationship with him, because it's personal conversations between the king and other heads of state that are rarely so important. Those other heads of state know that the king is not going to blab, is not going to put spin on the conversation. It's a quiet, private conversation, rather like the weekly ones that take place between the Prime Minister of our country and the king every week. That's a huge advantage for the king, because the people he's talking to know that he's not going to spill the beans. You might be wondering whether President Trump might spill the beans, but he'll be very much hoping not. And actually, to be honest, I think that seems to be what has happened over the last period of time that Trump has been in office. Trump hasn't actually revealed the details of private conversations, but we know they've taken place, because I think when President Trump said that NATO was rather backwards in coming forwards in Afghanistan, for example, well, we know that the king was privately in touch with the president to say, actually, that's not the truth, and I'm not very happy about you saying that.
Just tell us your thoughts diplomatically about the very interesting aspect of the fact that Trump seems to be very pro-royalty, pro-monarchy, pro-Elizabeth II, pro-Charles III. He is clearly not pro-Keir Starmer. He's complained about him many times. He said all sorts of things. Could that be a source of diplomatic problems, that the King is in favour but the Prime Minister of this country is not, with Donald Trump?
Absolutely. I think that is the nightmare scenario, Peter. The real concern must be, I think it's a concern within the palace, that Trump is majorly complimentary about the King, says what a fantastic job he's doing, and in the same breath says he doesn't like Keir Starmer, what he's doing, opposes his expedition in the war, etc., etc. To divide the King from the Prime Minister would be really unfortunate for the King, because I think that puts him in a very, very embarrassing position. He'll be very much hoping that that isn't going to take place. But it is possible, and he'll have to know how to react if he does say that.
What about Epstein? What about Andrew? Clearly, there's a lot of questions still. The King will be out and about. He could be heckled at various points. He has been heckled on this in the UK. Presumably the same thing might happen in the United States too, at these various points of very, very public displays, walkabouts, and indeed an address to Congress.
I'm sure that's possible, Peter. In fact, I'm sure the palace will have been thinking about exactly that. There has actually been, as you say, it has been shouted out questions in Britain, and so I'm pretty sure that the King is half expecting them to take place on this visit. I think the worst scenario would be if he was shouted at during his address to Congress. That would be probably very clearly heard on the TV monitors and microphones, and that would undoubtedly be embarrassing. I think it is worth pointing out that we in Britain appear to have taken the Epstein revelations far more importantly than the US seems to be doing.
Well, this is the point. Do you know what, Daniel? It was Emily Thornberry, and I had a load of messages from viewers and listeners saying, I've never agreed with Emily Thornberry before, I agree with her in this. She came on my show and said, isn't it interesting that the only three people who seem to have had, only three living people, I should say, who've had any real consequence, who have faced any real consequence as a result of Epstein, are Ghislaine Maxwell, rightly in prison, she is a paedophile, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, who was arrested, of course he is facing no charges currently, and Peter Mandelson, also arrested, not currently facing any charges. We'll see what happens with that. All three of them British?
Yeah, absolutely, Peter. I can wholly agree with that, because there must be lots of people in the United States who've had dealings with Epstein, and some of them not very savoury. The only person who seems to have got into any kind of trouble is Bill Gates, who undoubtedly did have questions to answer.
Yes.
But I can't help feeling that must be much more prevalent in the US than here. But we know that this is a subject that Donald Trump is not too keen to address.
Daniel, you're a mine of information about Parliament. I wonder if I could ask you about something slightly different. Hannah Spencer, you may have seen today, the Green Party MP, has talked about how she doesn't like parliamentarians being inebriated. She doesn't like the smell of alcohol when they are voting in those voting lobbies. They're very tightly packed in to those voting lobbies. I wonder if you could tell us your view on this as someone who has been around Parliament for many a year, knows it back to front, and of course, as I would imagine, have come across the odd sozzled parliamentarian or two.
There have indeed been such occasions. Indeed, I remember the former MP Alan Clark, you may remember him, was directly accused on the floor of the House of Commons by Claire Short for being drunk when delivering a speech. And he did sound very merry indeed at the time. So undoubtedly there is drinking. There is less drinking than there used to be, because the House of Commons used to finish its sessions no earlier than 10 o'clock every night. That was changed quite a long time ago when Tony Blair came into office. And now most evenings the sessions end at 7:30. Monday night is 10 p.m. So there is less scope for it, but there are still all-night sittings on occasions. And actually, I know people won't want to accept this, but being an MP can be quite a lonely job. And, you know, there are long gaps sometimes. If you're just there to be voting time after time after time through an evening, well, perhaps it's not surprising that people do decide that they might like a mild refreshment at some point in the evening, and then maybe that mild refreshment becomes a little less mild, and they become a little worse for wear. I am more on the puritanical side of drinking, so I haven't fallen to this so far, Peter. But yeah, it does occur, and I think a lot of people will support Hannah in what she says.
Daniel, as always, thank you. Daniel Britton there, political, constitutional and royal historian. Of course, at his fingertips, he had a very good example there of Alan Clark. Gosh, they don't make them like him anymore. Craig's been in touch and says the silly woman who thinks MPs shouldn't drink, she obviously had never had a grown-up job where you can be trusted to have a pint in your lunch break. We have kids trying to get into a position to run this country. Bobby says Hannah wants to ban alcohol, but chacking up or snorting a line, maybe snipping a woman's drink with a date rape drug, that's all fine under the Greens. Well, the Greens aren't certainly saying that you should be date raping people, but they do want all drugs to be legalised, which I think is a completely mad idea and very, very dangerous. Another person says, why on earth are you giving this Parliament drinking topic oxygen? It is nothing, it is not important, it's irrelevant. Only one MP has moaned. Talk about important topics. Well, I talk about what my viewers and listeners want to talk about, and we've had a huge reaction to that, far more than any other topic this evening, let me tell you. And one person simply says, I bet a night out with Hannah Spencer is a blast. Well, one person who thought they were on a very nice night out is the person we're going to speak to next. That is Victoria Churchill, a US-based journalist. Of course, that evening, the White House Correspondents' dinner went horribly wrong when a man called Cole Allen allegedly attempted assassination, the discharge of a firearm during a crime of violence, and the transportation of a firearm and ammunition through interstate commerce with intent to commit a felony. That's what he has been charged with in the last hour. We'll talk to Victoria about her experience on Saturday night. Stay with us.
Sent us a picture that made me feel so ashamed. We look like hoarders.
Chris Marshall!
Yeah, I'm actually recovering from an accident right now.
You've landed loose today, haven't you?
Yeah, don't shake the arm, Chris, too much.
You're with Danny Boyle, who's like the maddest director ever. He's got so much energy. He's like you.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, Caroline Levitt, who is the press secretary at the White House, has been talking about those really shocking events over the weekend when there was another attempted assassination against Donald Trump. This is what Caroline Levitt has been saying.
This is the third major assassination attempt against President Trump in 2 years. No other president in history has faced such repeated, serious attempts on his life. First and foremost, the President, the First Lady, and everyone in this White House are extraordinarily grateful to the brave law enforcement professionals who sprang into action to apprehend the would-be assassin and keep all of us safe.
Well, we know the charges have now been brought against the alleged attacker. We know that there were no injuries apart from one Secret Service agent who thankfully, after being shot, thankfully he was wearing a bulletproof vest. Now, Victoria Churchill is a US-based journalist who was there at the dinner, as were many other journalists. Victoria, it must have been terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was an outcome to the evening that nobody expected. You know, this was actually my first White House Correspondents' Dinner, so I had never attended the proceedings before, but I don't think I expected this to be the outcome, as did anybody. You know, some of my colleagues have been going to these for 20 plus years. But yeah, you know, I think most important part is, of course, nobody was hurt. But then, you know, now it's time to ask questions of how we got here. And, you know, I'm sure you're asking questions. I know I'm asking questions in my own reporting. And, you know, Congress, which I cover for the Daily Mail as a U.S. political reporter, members of Congress are also asking those questions.
Talk me through your evening. What happened?
Yeah, so, you know, those shots rang out pretty early on into the evening. I myself was actually a little bit late getting into the ballroom because I was taking photos outside. You know, everybody's seen the blue and white backgrounds. There was a couple of those staged outside of the ballroom just before the magnetometers. So I was there, you know, I got into the room, I think about 8:12, 8:15, and, you know, within 10 minutes is when the shots took place.
So when did you realize what was going on? Was it you heard? Did you know it was gunfire when you heard it? What did you do?
Yeah, so, you know, as I pointed out on several segments like this, you know, I'm actually somebody that participates in firearm shooting sports recreationally. And so, you know, in a crowd of Washington, D.C. journalists, that makes me more of a minority, but kind of across America, I'm one of, you know, millions of Americans that partakes in our Second Amendment rights. But that also means that I know what gunfire sounds like. And so, you know, I knew pretty quickly what was going on. And then I also know, because from training in firearms and self-defense situations, you're also taught that your firearm is your last resort. And so, you know, you're taught situational awareness and avoidance and making sure that you can get out of a bad situation before actually, you know.
So what did you do on Saturday? Just talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I got under the table, I think, as did many other people. And, you know, again, in my mind, I comprehended that it was gunfire. I think for some other people, it took them a while to come to that realization. You know, people were asking, you know, was it balloons? Was it a blown speaker? Did people break glass? Because, you know, they were doing the dinner service. So, of course, they were carrying out plates and things like that. But, yeah, I mean, I knew pretty quickly what was going on and what I had to do.
Were you scared?
You know, I think probably more shock, and I think that adrenaline didn't really wear off for probably 4 to 6 hours until I went to bed later that night. I remember kind of shaking and honestly waking up pretty achy the next morning, as if I had just like run a marathon or something. Or I guess, you know, I was a rower in college, so, you know, it kind of felt like the day after race day when I woke up the next morning. But yeah, I mean, other than that, you know, I did a couple of segments, TV segments from the ballroom that night. And, you know, the hosts were like, how are you so calm? And I'm like, I guess I just, no guns and no firearms. And that's why, I mean, there were people around me crying, bawling their eyes out. So, you know, definitely a wide range of emotions. And, you know, honestly, the other part of it is I've worked pretty much nonstop since then. I typically work our Sunday shift. And so, you know, kind of for me, keeping any sort of semblance of routine, I think has helped me cope and process. And, you know, doing segments like this, just reliving my experience, I guess for me has been helpful. For other people, it may not have been, but I guess for me, that's just how I'm coping with it, is by sharing my point of view.
And strange, I'm sure, too, for a reporter to be part of the story.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think that's what makes this incident different than everything else, even other than similar attempts on President Trump's life, is that the media has never been the target. And in this case, of course, we've read the manifesto. We were not necessarily the target, but this man was intent on causing harm to anybody that got between him and those targets. And, as I like to point out, as I've been doing these segments, of course, you saw the principals, president, vice president, press secretary, first lady up at the front of the room, but other cabinet officials were scattered among the media, for the Daily Mail, not at my direct table, but at a table with my colleagues. FBI Director Kash Patel was there. And so these cabinet secretaries were interspersed throughout the room. And so, if this man had gotten inside, he could have very easily hit a journalist on the way to his target.
Yes. Well, listen, thank you for telling us your story. Please look after yourself. And I'm sure we'll be asking many, many questions about that as time goes on. That is Victoria Churchill, our US-based journalist on the Trump dinner shooter. We're going to talk in just a second about whether Scotland has too few migrants. That is what the SNP says. We're going to have a debate between Claire Muldoon and Matthew Hulbert. That is going to be box office. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. The problems for Starmer continue. We'll talk about those this hour. We'll also talk about a number of other things, including the new IRA car bomb in Northern Ireland by the dissident Republican group, the New IRA. So many people just not talking about the fact that there has been terrorism in the UK in the last 48 hours or so. We'll talk as well about Scotland. The SNP are saying that there are too few migrants in Scotland. What do you think about that? And where have all the teaspoons gone? The eternal British mystery of the missing teaspoons. Professor Tara Spires-Jones reveals the science behind a recent study on why teaspoons go missing and where they end up. Have you ever stolen a teaspoon? Lots of people getting in touch about that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're talking about drinking in Parliament too. Plenty of people getting in touch about what the Green Party MP Hannah Spencer has said about that. As I say, 0344 499 1000. That's the number for calls. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note or a WhatsApp text message to the main number. You can ring me on the main number as well. One more time, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss. And tomorrow night as well, we're going to talk about that Veterans Bill, which I think is probably going to go through Parliament tonight. If we get a vote between now and the end of the programme, I will bring those numbers to you. And we're hoping to speak to the Shadow Defence Minister. Certainly in principle, he's agreed to do so, Mark Francois, tomorrow night. So we'll hopefully speak to him about that, what it means for all the veterans and their families who watch and listen to this show. So much to discuss. I want you to be part of the conversation between now and 10 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. Dawn in Chelmsford on Starmer's travail says nobody ever mentions David Lammy. He is masterminding, see what you did there, a bid for the top job if Starmer falls. What could possibly go wrong, says Dawn in Chelmsford, alluding to David Lammy there, the Deputy Prime Minister, and his ill-fated run out on Mastermind, Celebrity Mastermind, which I highly suggest watching at some stage. Lee in Market Harbour says, I think Hannah Spencer, the Green MP, has just gone joint top with Keir Starmer in the most annoying voice contest. Boring. Great show, says Lee. Darren in South Wales says, I still can't get used to you being on in the evenings. Try being me, Darren. Anyway, regarding the Green Party, Hannah Spencer, you could be as something as a fart. I'm not going to read that out, although I just have read the word fart, when voting in a general election. And that is perhaps the most important thing we decide. That person could take us to war, for example. Having said that, you shouldn't be making very important decisions while under the influence. I hardly drink now, but we've all made bad decisions while under the influence. You can ask any of my wives, says Darren. My goodness. Stephen Thirsk says, I'm a veteran who has served in most corners of the province. I think he's referring to Northern Ireland there, of course. Labour have reportedly said that UK veterans should relish the opportunity to prove their innocence. Do you think that line of thinking extends to the Prime Minister in the vote tomorrow? Don't hold your breath. Ernie says, Hannah, Spencer is just doing what all left-wing politicians do, and that's try to take away all of our traditions and what made us a country that everyone around the world wants to come to. Joe also says, I bet if you took away the MP's heavily subsidised bar and made them pay the same price as the rest of the public, they most likely wouldn't drink in Parliament. And one more before we go to our next item. Alex in Cardiff says, I'm finding this lack of coverage by mainstream media about Belfast. I knew someone who was older in the army who I really looked up to died in the Troubles, but there were a few tiny lines in the local paper, but nothing in the national papers. It still upsets me. You don't hear about those people who lost their lives in the Troubles, says Alex in Cardiff. Well, listen, the Troubles are thankfully over now. The 1998 Belfast Agreement ended that, but we are going to be talking about that car bomb. There's some who want to go back to the past. A small number, but a significant one. They let off a car bomb. That was on Saturday night in Northern Ireland, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. As Alex correctly says, so much of the media minimising this, not talking about it. It's an important thing. We're going to talk about it in a few minutes' time. We're also going to talk about the SNP, the Scottish Nationalist Party, which is arguing that Scotland has too few migrants. There are not enough migrants in Scotland. That is what the SNP is saying. And it's a very interesting aspect of this, because the Minister, Mary McAllen, says too few migrants coming to Scotland and that migration is good and necessary for the economy. She was speaking to BBC Scotland as part of a Holyrood election debate on immigration. There were representatives of the 6 main political parties there. A Reform representative said immigration had pushed the system to breaking point. Other parties were split on the issue. A Conservative said voters believe governments did not have a grip on immigration. Lib Dems and Labour said immigration was necessary, and the Green Party said it was valuable. While powers over immigration are not devolved to the Scottish Parliament, it's an issue that voters say mattered to them. And I know from speaking to so many of our viewers and listeners over the past 5.5 years in this programme that immigration is one of the main issues that people want to talk about. So we'll talk about it right now. The political commentators Matthew Hulbert and Claire Muldoon will have their say. Claire is, of course, very Scottish. She's unashamedly Scottish, full-fat Scottish, certainly in her Scottishness. Matthew is from England, but of course has many, many views on just about everything. Claire, perhaps I could start with you. What do you make of what the SNP are saying?
Well, look, the SNP are really, in my view, are just an absolute omnishambles of any political party. They have driven Scotland firmly into the ground, the core of the earth. They are. We had a vape shop fire in Glasgow. Glasgow is like a war-torn city now. My mother still lives there. My family still live there. In fact, we even heard from your sister channel, talkSport, Ali McCoist was saying how bad Scotland, Glasgow in particular
But Scottish voters look set to give them yet another majority, Claire. So the majority of people voting in this election don't agree with you.
Well, they might not, but I think a lot of people that I speak to definitely do. And I think part of the problem was that Nicola Sturgeon gave, and Humza Yousaf, gave the vote to 16-year-olds as well, and that hasn't helped either. Now, they're running scared, both of Reform and the Green Party, which I think shows the direct correlation between what's happening both in England and Wales, and to a certain extent, Northern Ireland as well. Because let's not forget, and you quite rightly said, let's not conflate immigration from asylum seeking. And under Tony Blair in the 1999 Home Office Act, he gave, when Jack Straw was Home Secretary, the right to send asylum seekers to Glasgow in particular, to Scotland generally. And what that has done is put a massive burden of cost from Westminster, I hasten to add. Reform put the figures closer to 4,000 with asylum seekers than the recorded 3,800, because with every one claim, that just takes in one family. It doesn't take in the numbers within that. And I'll tell you right now, Peter, there is an absolute bulge of asylum seekers in predominantly Glasgow that Glasgow as a city cannot support. And that is deafening. And that is really an issue that has to be dealt with.
Matthew Hulbert is with us too, another political commentator. He's a Liberal Democrat activist. He has been a councillor for the Liberal Democrats previously, but is not running in this election. We'll just be absolutely clear about that. What do you make of this row, Matthew?
Great to be with you, great to be with you, Peter, and hi to Claire as well, and of course to your viewers and listeners. Well, I mean, you know, I'm not Scottish, but I watch Scottish politics. I've got friends in the Scottish Lib Dems, and you know, from what I hear, a majority will be given to pro-immigration parties next month, from what the polls tell us. So, I mean, I think that Claire's entitled to her view, but she appears to be in a significant minority.
However, what we don't know is whether people, and we can never know, whether people are voting for those parties because of their stance on immigration, or whether it could be many, many other issues as well. Immigration, of course, is a top 3 issue for many people, but are people going to vote for the SNP, which actually doesn't have, or indeed the Liberal Democrats, which, or any party actually in Scotland, which doesn't have much say over this? It is simply an argument that the SNP is putting forward, Matthew.
I think if people had that as their main concern, they wouldn't be voting for pro-immigration parties. So I think because that makes no sense.
No,
so,
but my point is that if it is a concern in any degree, whether they think there are too many or too few, in either side of the argument, we don't know that's why they're voting for those parties. They may be voting for a pro-immigration party, but they may not feel that strongly necessarily about immigration. We don't know that.
No, we don't, and you're perfectly right to say that. I mean, what I'd say is that, you know, I believe that, yes, of course, we have to have a system, but as you know, Peter, from our past discussions on this issue, I'm very liberal on immigration. I think immigrants are a benefit to us economically, culturally, and socially. Now, I accept that I'm on the very liberal end on this issue, and that it is a significant concern for people. But I'll just give you one figure that I just looked up. Apparently, and this is about England. I'm afraid I don't know Scotland, but apparently, as of June last year, approximately 21% of NHS staff in England are of a non-British nationality. That's around 325,000 people. The NHS would be on its knees without immigration. That's a fact.
Well, look, it's also a fact that in 2000, when Nicola Sturgeon was Health Secretary in Scotland, what's the figures? Between 2009 and 2012, she actually cut the number of nurses to be funded to train. And that was highlighted as being a ticking time bomb. And 14 years later, that's exactly what it is. This is all at the feet of the SNPs. Ill management, inability to have any vision, strategy. They based everything on anecdotal evidence. My goodness me, we've got Rosebank and Jackdaw. They can't even use that to drill, baby drill, and get us domestic gas settled and make us energy efficient domestically to guarantee safer, better bills in this country. The SNP are a complete disaster. And for Mary McAllen to turn round and say that we need immigration in Scotland, I think she needs to go back to school, learn the facts, deal with the facts, and then, with John Swinney, come up with a far better manifesto and stop bleating on about the fact that Scotland needs independence, which, remember, was supposed to be a once-in-a-generational vote. And what do we see now? John Swinney coming out, and he's going to launch his manifesto to say that they're going to push for a second referendum on immigration, on independence. And whilst I'm at it, Glasgow in a couple of weeks or a few weeks is supposed to host the Commonwealth Games. Did you see the advertising for the domestic, for the Glasgow, the Scottish ceremony outfits? My goodness me. At worst, it was abhorrent, and at best, it was bold and sexist. What on earth is happening up there? I don't know. It's ridiculous, and I know people that are living there don't want to be part of it, and that is a grave concern.
Matthew, the fact is it not, that Scotland is dealing with what all other parts of the UK are dealing with as well, which is an increased population, mainly from immigration, some through the birth rate, but mainly through immigration. And whether there are people who are here for exactly the right reasons, for example, being nurses or doctors in the NHS, which I'm sure we would welcome largely, I certainly would, we're in a situation where there are simply more people. There are simply more people putting pressure on, for example, the NHS, putting pressure on schools, on hospitals, as I mentioned, on housing, for example. And actually, maybe Scotland doesn't need more immigration necessarily. It just needs to sort itself out, serve the people who are there at the moment. What do you make of that, Matthew?
Well, I mean, I hear this from people and from politicians the whole time, but the simple fact is, and don't ask me the reason for this, because I don't.
Maybe you hear it the whole time because it's true.
Peter, let me get just a sentence out of argument, and then you can come back to me. I don't know why this is the case, but it seems to be the case that many of our own people, in quotes, don't want to do many jobs which immigrants will come here and do, and so therefore we should be very grateful that they are prepared to come here and do those jobs when, for a reason that I can't fathom, many of our own people, in quotes, again, I hate that phrase, but I can't think of a better one as I'm sat here, don't seem to want to do those jobs. So I'd ask you and I'd ask Claire, is that not the case? And is that not why, on this occasion, the SNP are right to say, and I wish more parties south of the border would say it, that we need more immigration? It's a simple fact.
You're saying, are you not, Matthew, that we simply accept that these people who are our own people, as you say, don't actually want to work, and deal with that and give them welfare payments? Surely the SNP and indeed the Labour government and the different devolved administrations right across the UK should be focusing on those people and saying, how can we get you back to work if you can in fact work? I'm not having to go at disabled people, no problem with people who deserve those benefits, absolutely fine. But if you're simply not working and there is a job you can do, and governments, including the SNP, Labour, the Sinn Féin and the DUP in Northern Ireland and other parties as well, Labour in Wales, saying, well, we'll just have more immigration because that's the easiest bit. We've got a really knotty, difficult problem with welfare. We'll not deal with that. In fact, we'll just bring in more immigrants to do the jobs.
Well, of course, you know, if people can work, they should. You won't hear me saying anything other than that. But, I mean, I just think of another I don't know if you'd call it an industry, but another profession that I care a great deal about, social care. Again, where would social care be without immigration? Again, it would be on its knees. So I think we just need to be realistic. You know, people can be anti-immigration all they want. I wish they weren't that, but they can. If that's their worldview, they can be that. But they also need to be realistic that our country needs these people.
Claire?
Well, look, back to Scotland. Energy, education, health and police are all devolved powers, and none of them are actually attaining any great depth or any great increases in anything. Education falling off a cliff, health education and health falling off a cliff under the SNP governance. That's not a case of people not willing or wanting to work. That's because their strategy and their manifesto have made it really difficult to empower people, to help them work and to actually make the jobs. They've killed practically everything, and that they need out in order for the resources to come in. Glasgow has got the largest number per capita of asylum seekers in the UK, and that is something that has to be addressed. The bulging population within Glasgow, they can't cope with it. The education facilities can't cope with it, and the police can't govern, and the health can't work with it. And this is all down to the SNP mismanagement of resources and of public services. And that, I'm afraid, is all tied into people's ability to work and the jobs for them to enable them to work. They're just not there.
Thank you both very much. That was Claire Muldoon and Matthew Hulbert, political commentators both. What do you think about what they said? 0344 499 1000. Debbie says, if Scotland wants the migrants they can have the lot of them. Let them take all ours and give them independence. Jobs are good. And Janice in Staffordshire says the SNP think the more migrants they get, the more will vote for them. Becca says, how many asylum seekers has Matthew Hulbert taken in? Well, I didn't get a chance to ask him that question, but I think it's probably zero. Another person says, Matthew says, Claire is speaking for minority of Glaswegians. I thought Liberals were all for standing up for minority groups. And another person says, what is Scotland like for housing, please? Is there, here it is a disaster. So where would more immigrants live? Lots as well on drinking at lunchtime. Michelle says, my late father was a very successful man. He worked from the age of 15. When he got his first proper job, he and his friends spent every lunchtime having a bite to eat and a few drinks. Then it was back to the office. Sure, it's unusual now, but Hannah Spencer, the Green MP, is pretending butter wouldn't melt, appeasing the Muslim vote whilst her party want to legalise drugs. What on earth is happening to the UK? Alex says, Winston Churchill, born 1874, died 1965. Alcohol and cigars didn't seem to affect his lifespan that much. And Michelle has been in touch and says there's an explanation as to where all the spoons have gone. They ran away with the dish. Michelle, that is a great joke. Cardwellian in its tenor. Lots more to discuss. We will take plenty of calls from you, and we're also talking to the professor who's done that study about where the teaspoons have all gone. We're also talking about the much more serious issue, of course, of the car bomb in Northern Ireland, and anything else you want to talk to. You want to talk to me before 10 o'clock? You pick up the phone right now in the break. You give Matt a ring. You tell him what you want to say, and we'll get you on between now and 10. The number, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Sent us a picture that made me feel so ashamed. We look like hoarders.
Chris Marshall!
Yeah, I'm actually recovering from an accident right now.
You've landed loose today, haven't you?
Yeah, don't shake the arm, Chris, too much.
You're with Danny Boyle, who's like the maddest director ever. He's got so much energy. He's like you.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Speaking about immigration in Scotland and the fact that the SNP are saying that there is not enough migration to Scotland, plenty of people have been in touch. Margaret is in Glasgow and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Margaret, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, I'm calling from Glasgow. Horrified to hear that John Swinney is wanting more migrants. Glasgow City Council, that's where I live, they have asked Holyrood and Westminster more than once, many times, to stop sending them. Glasgow City Council is on its knees. Can't even afford the cleansing. The amount of rats that's overtaken the whole place is horrific. And they keep sending them.
How's it affected your life, Margaret, yourself? Have you noticed problems with getting GP's appointments or housing problems, education? What just more people does mean an effect, doesn't it?
It does. But I'm 61 now, but it's mostly for the young ones. I have a young niece, and she's living in a ground floor flat. She's working, having an apartment. She's been on the housing list for 12, 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've got one daughter, both working. And when I go up, I can't believe this. They actually shout in the street outside my niece's house, oh, such and such has got this drug or whatever. And I'm like, you need to get out of here. You need to get out of here. But there's no places, there's no houses.
So what do you make of the SNP saying this? Why do you think they're saying it at this time with the elections coming up, perhaps?
Well, the thing about that is they must know that that is really unpopular. I can't speak for the rest of Glasgow, but I know Glasgow's overrun. We had an article in a paper about 2 or 3 weeks ago that all pubs and clubs were now starting to escort their female workers at night time to the bus station or get them taxed. It's not safe, even during the day. You see them in George Square, hanging about, the girls 5, 6 o'clock all dolled up to go out. And they literally follow them, they touch their hair, and they say all sorts to them.
Okay.
It's horrible.
Margaret, listen, thanks for your call. I really appreciate that. This has come out of a debate on the BBC in Scotland at the weekend. The SNP minister, Mary McAllen, saying too few migrants are coming to Scotland. Migration is good and necessary for the economy. Reform said immigration had pushed the system to breaking point. The Conservative on the panel said voters believe the government did not have a grip on immigration. The Lib Dems and Labour people on that panel said immigration was necessary, and the Green Party said it was valuable. So it's interesting as well, because powers over immigration are actually not devolved to the Scottish Parliament, but it is an issue that voters say matters to them. Of course, on the 7th of May, there are local elections in England. There's the election to the Welsh Assembly, but there is the Scottish parliamentary election as well. Lots of people getting in touch from Scotland, including Alison from Renfrewshire. Alison, you're a new caller. I think it's the first time you've maybe given me a call anyway. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you very much. I would just like to say that Claire is absolutely correct. Glasgow is falling apart. It's gone from being the second city of the empire to an absolute dump where people are scared to go even in the daytime.
Yes, indeed, and a lot of concern on this big issue. Will it affect how you vote?
Yes, it certainly will. I was an SNP voter, to my shame, for many years, but I will definitely not be voting SNP ever again in my lifetime.
Okay. Listen, thank you for your thoughts, Alison, there in Renfrewshire. Let's go to Eva in Glasgow, like the caller we spoke to a second ago. Margaret. Eva, you're very, very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Basically, I'd really more or less just like to agree with everyone else, and especially Claire Muldoon. She got it spot on. Everything that's happening here. I've lived in Glasgow all my life. I've lived in London. Never been frightened to be anywhere in the world, really. And Glasgow is just not Glasgow anymore. And all the thing, people are talking about get more immigration. Maybe immigration, not illegal immigration. It's just full. We're full to the gunnels, and we can't take anymore. I mean, we have got the most illegal asylum seekers in the UK. And if you send any more, we're going to, I mean, it's bursting. The place is bursting.
Well, there's a difference, of course, between asylum seekers and those who want asylum in this country, and people who are here to, legally to fill those gaps and so on. Is it just a matter of too many people?
No, it's all the place, Glasgow's become, it's dirty, it's just not safe. I mean, I agree with the caller earlier on. I wouldn't want to be in Glasgow later on at night, and that's never been like that. I've never been frightened to be in my own city. And what she said about people approaching you and approaching people, young girls and whatever.
But Glasgow has historically, I mean, it's a great city. I lived in Glasgow for a number of months, and the people were incredibly welcoming. But crime has always been a problem in any large city. There are all sorts of sectarian issues in Glasgow as well. I mean, presumably that would have made you feel unsafe previously, would it not, Eva?
Not really, because I've never seen any violence like that. I've never seen any violence on any side of,
Okay.
But it's just totally different in Glasgow. It's just not got the same feel. It's like a war zone. Claremont Bloom was right. It's like a war zone.
Would you consider leaving the city, Eva? Is it that bad?
No, I don't want to. Well, not for good. But I'm not saying that. I'm not saying I never would. But
sure. Very interesting. Eva, I think this is your first call to us. Is that right?
Yeah.
Great stuff. Well, listen, really interesting to hear from you, and thank you for your call. And please do give us a ring in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Eva. Really interesting to hear from her. Jay's been in touch on text and says, typical leftist loons, the SNP preaching how amazing immigration is, when what they really mean is, I don't want a white person, i.e. themselves, wiping my senile mother's poo-smeared bottom. Utterly vile and clearly racist in Jay's view. Another person says, money and pay rates, Matthew. That's why people won't do these jobs. Talking about Matthew Hulbert, who is our commentator who was on a bit earlier on a pro-migration stance. This person continues, if you're in the NHS or caring for the elderly, pay them more than the national minimum wage. It's an important job and worth the wage. I've done it. You get more stacking shelves in Tesco than looking after our vulnerable. It's not a job where you just switch off at night. You care about your work, so you should be paid for the extra work and time that you put into it. MG is in Staffordshire and is on the show now. Thanks for the call. What would you like to say?
Hello, I'd just like to say, I do firmly believe that there are many examples where immigrants, whether legal, whatever, have actually provided, great services to our communities, and we would never be without them, and we would never want to be without them. However, why should they, though, also in other areas such as Scotland, have some kind of preferential treatment? Why are we not encouraging teachers, for example, in England and Wales who are qualified to work in state education, and the national curriculum, which many were trained under, is for England and Wales? Why are there not courses to help people to work in Scotland and to learn about the Scotland?
Well, I think that's a very good point, and I do think...
Why is that not being done?
Well, that's a very good point, and the issue I would add to that is, if there is a big problem, the wider issue, I suppose, as I mentioned earlier on to Matthew Hulbert, is if there's a load of people in this country who won't work, surely are, for whatever reason, what we should be doing is stop giving them welfare payments and say, get a job or you won't get welfare payments, instead of saying, we're just going to import a load more people, because that's an easier thing to do.
I think there should be a lot more incentives, but I think there should be more training.
Okay.
More training. I think it's insufficient. There should be more YTSs and things like that. Go back to how it used to be. There should be more trades. People should be encouraged to work in trades. They're not. How can you encourage people to learn skills such as woodwork or to learn metalwork and to go and work in a factory or set up their own business when everything's brought in from abroad?
Okay.
So what incentive is there? There's nothing. We should be encouraging people to move. If the immigrants and whenever want to come to England, not a problem. But give us the chance to go to Scotland or Wales and to be able to work there if we haven't got work over here.
Listen, thank you. Really interesting points there. Keep them coming in. We've got half an hour of the programme left. We're going to talk about that car bomb that so few people are talking about. Terrorism on the streets of our country over the weekend. We're also going to find out, where have all the teaspoons gone? Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You wouldn't know it, but there was a car bomb in this country over the weekend. It happened just outside Belfast. The man was ordered to drive to Dunmurry police station, southwest of Belfast city centre. An explosive device placed in the boot of a delivery driver's vehicle. Just because it happens in Northern Ireland doesn't mean it's not important. And terror on the streets of our country should be talked about, should be debated. We've got to get the information on this. We've got to inform ourselves, and so much of the media have ignored this story over the last few days, although there's been superb reporting, including from Jonathan McCambridge, who is the editor of the Press Association on the island of Ireland. We're going to be speaking to him in just a second. But before that, let's hear a clip of the Police Service of Northern Ireland Deputy Chief Constable Bobby Singleton.
Anything on the news? Too soon for Belfast Library here. I'm not sure what they're probably anyway. It's not fine.
Sorry, we actually don't have that clip of Bobby Singleton just at this exact moment, but what we saw there on the screen was a burning car. So sorry for that technical error there. Clearly gremlins in the system. We've had some reaction, of course, from the First Minister of Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill of Sinn Féin. She says, "I think it's with real relief that we're standing here today, and no one was seriously killed or injured, but that does not take away from for a second from the seriousness of what occurred on Saturday evening. To all those who are responsible for what happened, I say, get off the backs of communities. We will not accept being dragged backwards. Those responsible for the selfish act have nothing to offer our society." The Deputy First Minister, the DUP's Emma Little-Pengelly, said she was absolutely appalled by the attack. Well, let's speak now to Johnny McCambridge. He's editor of the Press Association on the island of Ireland. Johnny, thank you for joining us this evening. Can you just talk us through what happened on Saturday night, the shocking and very concerning event?
Sure, Peter, and I think you make a useful point, which is if this had been happening in any other part of the UK, it would be headline news, and it would be dominating the broadcasts. It's obviously slightly different because it happens here, and people are perhaps more used to these sort of things. But basically, what happened Saturday night, Dunmurry, which is just southwest of Belfast, a delivery driver was essentially taken hostage, threatened, and told to drive his vehicle to a police station. A very crude explosive device, which was essentially a gas canister with an explosive fitted to it, was put in the back of his car. He drove to the police station, and he got out. He alerted the police, and while they were in the process of evacuating, because this is quite a heavily built up area, a lot of families in this area. There were babies being taken from their homes while this was happening. The device exploded. As I say, it was very, very crude, but thankfully, and I think the senior police said it was a miracle that nobody was actually hurt in the device. But I suppose it shows the deadly capability of these dissident Republican terror groups. It's the second attack we've had like this.
So there'll be a lot of our viewers and listeners. Johnny, you and I know this pretty well. You far better than I do. But when you say dissident Republicans, you're talking about people who are against the peace process. They call themselves the new IRA. The IRA, their political wing, the old IRA, their political wing, Sinn Féin in government in Northern Ireland. In fact, the First Minister, Michelle O'Neill, is of that party. She's condemning this because there are people who are against the peace process who still, 27, 28 years on from the Belfast Agreement, are still in a situation where they don't accept peace in Northern Ireland.
Absolutely, and that may be hard for a lot of people to get their head around. People who imagine obviously the Troubles or something from a different generation, something yourself and myself will remember all too well, Peter, from growing up. But yes, I mean, so Good Friday Agreement 1998, the final provisional IRA ceasefire was 2005. We still have these small groups, and the one that is most active are called IRA. Very, very small numbers, very limited. And it doesn't take a lot to cause terror on the streets.
But these attacks are quite rare, Johnny, aren't they?
Well, up until we've had 2 in a month now here, up until then we hadn't had anything for probably about 3 years. But people will remember probably the last significant attack was the shooting of senior police officer John Caldwell in 2023. And since then, everything had been quiet. And I think the narrative had sort of built up that the police and the security services had done a really good job in infiltrating these dissident groups. And it was almost seen that they were broken away. But what we've seen in the last month with these 2 attacks, and particularly this one at the weekend, shows that they're still there, they still exist, and they're determined to keep going with us until something much more tragic occurs.
Let's get that clip now. This is the Police Service of Northern Ireland Deputy Chief Constable Bobby Singleton.
The vehicle had been driven there by a delivery driver who had been hijacked in the Twinbrook area of West Belfast a short time before. A gas cylinder type device was placed in the boot of the delivery driver's vehicle, and he was ordered to drive it to Dunmurry PSNI. Police personnel immediately, and I have to say extremely courageously, literally running into danger, placing themselves in harm's way, evacuated nearby homes in order to protect the community. A number of residents, including 2 babies, were being taken into safety by officers when the device exploded, engulfing the vehicle in flames and sending debris in all directions. Yeah, well, you make a good point. It is now the second attack of this nature in just a month. There are very many similarities between the 2 incidents, and as a consequence of that, our early working hypothesis is that this may well be the work of the new IRA, who claimed responsibility for the attack in Lurgan back on the 30th of March. Having said that, obviously our investigators will keep an open mind. It's still the very early stages of the investigation.
Johnny, having worked as a special advisor in the Northern Ireland office and being from the area, I know that the Secretary of State, now Hilary Benn, will spend about 1/4 to 1/3 of his time on security issues. We're still not in a situation where security can be devolved to Northern Ireland. Policing is, justice is, but that security aspect, MI5 still have many, many people who work in Northern Ireland. I just wonder from your perspective whether you ever see a time where these sorts of things are completely behind us.
It seems, there's no momentum in that direction, Peter. I mean, some of your audience may be surprised to hear, that, for example, the police service here in Northern Ireland, all officers are routinely armed, which obviously is not the case with other police forces. As I say, that this sort of thing is very rare. But whenever you have these groups who are bent on this sort of ideology, it does take a huge amount of, I suppose, time and effort to keep on top of them. And there will be, now that we've had a situation of 2 attacks inside such a short period of time, I would imagine there will be a serious review ongoing on how exactly these things have allowed to happen. Obviously, I wouldn't go as far as say it's been an intelligence failure, but certainly the new IRA seeming to be ahead of the game in a sense that the police and the security service have not known what's happened in these last 2 occasions until it's unfolded on the streets.
Thank you, Johnny. Johnny McCambridge there, who is the Press Association Island of Ireland editor. So thank you to him. And thanks to Elisa in Chelmsford, who has said, one of my favourite series is Blue Lights. It looks very realistic. The thought of things worsening in Belfast is terrifying for police in particular. Blue Lights, of course, is about policing in Northern Ireland. It's a fantastic series in the BBC. Fiction, of course, but some of the issues that are there clearly are real when it comes to dissident republicanism. Elisa says, ignoring things that are bubbling under the surface invariably leads to trouble, and that is a very, very good point to make. Lots of people getting in touch about migration, including Andre from Farnham. Andre, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. How are you? You're
very well, thank you. Very well. Good evening.
Evening. Well, my point is, when we're talking about Scotland and England and migration and Europe, it's a problem across the board. I think what we're really witnessing here is a global socialism. I do believe that things have been set in motion and progressive governments have just gone along with it because I think that's just the way it is.
Global socialism? I mean, if you look at France, for example, they're moving in a more right-wing direction. On this country, for example, the polls all say that Reform UK could well be the next government of this country.
Well, this is true, and I'm not suggesting that's not true, But you're looking at the EU doing everything they can to stop populist parties getting in. I believe it when Marine Le Pen gets in, but I don't think she will. I think something will stop her at the last minute. There'll be some sort of legal challenge or something made up. There's definitely a battle going on here between, I don't think it's actually right and left. I think it's more like progressive and populism. But I do think it's coming from a much higher authority. That's the why everyone seems to be taking.
What's the higher authority? Are you honestly suggesting there's a globalist conspiracy here?
Not so much a conspiracy. No, I think probably it might be dressed up as a conspiracy, but I actually think it comes from the UN. I think these are projects that UN and Davos and global politics playing out in that way. And I think they've always wanted to do this. The liberal fanatics have always said, "Oh, let's just mess everybody up into new tribes." And
I'm honestly not sure how much I agree with you, Andre. But listen, thanks for your points this evening. I really appreciate them. Debbie says Matthew talked about social care earlier on. These carers should be homegrown, well-paid employees. The people who need social care have paid into the system, have possibly given up their houses, and are now paying tax on their pensions for this care. Why should they be given substandard care by people who can't even speak English? The carers should be well paid. If you want the people who care, then pay them. They take their work home. They just don't switch off when they get home. Real, genuine carers will discuss things with their family and friends to give the best care possible. Well, I can honestly say the carers who looked after my grandmother, who died a couple of years ago at the age of 96, she lived with my aunt for the last couple of years of her life. Carers came in to help her, and some of them were from Northern Ireland, some of them were not born in Northern Ireland, and all of them, I would say, gave her great care. That's just an anecdotal example. Clearly there's bad care and good care, but very, very interesting from Debbie there, who sent that in. MPs drinking, big issue this evening. Lots of people want to talk about it. John in Bournemouth is one of them. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hello.
I never thought I would ever agree with anything that the Green Party would say. And I was driving back tonight from watching our lads training for a football match that we're playing on Wednesday night. And as I was driving back, I heard the comment from, I can't remember the lady's name, the new MP.
Hannah Spencer, yeah.
And I thought, oh, what a load of nonsense. And then as I was driving back, and I thought, well, actually, she has got a point here in regard the drinking at work and everything. And I served some time in the military, and I've spent a lot of time in public service. And actually, policemen are not allowed to drink. Soldiers aren't allowed to drink. So what makes it right for MPs to, in between a vote, to go into the bar and have a beer or two and everything and go back to work?
But those people you mentioned, policemen, soldiers, they have a shift. They have, okay, it might be 12 hours, might be 8 hours, 14 hours, however long that is. You're on shift and then you're off shift. MPs are rarely off duty, and they might argue that if you've been in meetings and doing things from, maybe an interview for a breakfast programme at 7:30 in the morning, then you go into Parliament, you're there the whole day dealing with constituents and all the rest of it, you've been in the chamber, you've done all the things an MP does, you get to 6 o'clock in the evening, you have nothing to do until 10 o'clock, really, that you have to do anyway. What's wrong with having a pint?
No, I'm sorry. It doesn't. I'm sorry. It doesn't sit well with me, to be honest with you. The drinking at work. It's you're still in your working environment. Yeah. I'm sorry. I can't go along with that. So
okay.
I have to support, for goodness sake.
You have to support Hannah Spencer of the Green Party. You didn't think you were going to say that.
That would be it, though.
There's been quite a lot of support for her this evening, John, actually. And it's funny when you look at some of the polling. The YouGov polling firm have done a snap poll. They've surveyed 5,291 adults in Great Britain just today. And 76% of people basically agree with you. They say 52% completely unacceptable, 24% somewhat unacceptable.
Yeah. No, I agree. I just don't think it's acceptable, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, John, listen, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. That's John in Bournemouth. We're going to answer one of the greatest mysteries of the universe in a few minutes' time. Where do all the teaspoons go? I don't know about you, if you're in an office, you're in a factory, you're in a workplace, in your work break, you can never find a teaspoon. Also at home as well, teaspoons go missing. I had quite a number of forks go missing. Well, now a professor from Edinburgh University, very good, very prestigious university. She has done major research into this. This is Tara Spires-Jones, Professor Tara Spires-Jones. She is going to join me in a second to find out the science behind those missing teaspoons. We'll also have a quick word with Petri Hoskin about what's coming up in her programme, and we'll maybe take another call as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
us a picture that made me feel so ashamed. We look like hoarders.
Chris Marshall!
Yeah, I'm actually recovering from an accident right now.
You've landed loose today, haven't you?
Yeah, don't shake the arm, Chris, too much.
Emily!
With Danny Boyle, who's like the maddest director ever. He's got so much energy. He's like you.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Nicholas says, let me get this straight. Matthew Hulbert from the Lib Dems says our own people will not do some jobs, so we need immigration. Of course, no one in Scotland or anywhere in the UK discriminates against white people when it comes to employment. How many will he home? Another person on Twitter says, if any of the emergency services can't drink on duty, then why should MPs? They're there to make decisions for the country. It doesn't matter if it's a boring day for them. Remove their vote. And D says, Peter, why don't they not subsidise the bars in Parliament, raise prices in line with local establishments, and not let MPs claim it on expenses? It may discourage as much drinking. Well, in my experience, MPs generally don't claim that on expenses. I'm not sure alcohol would actually get through these days, but a very interesting point nonetheless. Speaking of drinking, this time the tea that Matt, the assistant producer, very kindly makes me, that fuels my 3 hours on this show. Teaspoons. Well, we have those little stirrers, those little wooden stirrers, which I think are quite a good idea. They're disposable and recyclable, fear not. But the question is, what happens to all those teaspoons in your office, in your factory, in your work break room, in your home? Where do they go? It's a riddle that's baffled millions in offices and institutions across the world for decades. Now, British scientists have concluded, well, there's no definitive answer. But Professor of Neurodegeneration at the University of Edinburgh, Professor Tara Spires-Jones, has at least some of the answer. Tara, thank you for joining us. Where have all the spoons gone?
Well, I wish I could tell you, Peter. We don't know where they went, but we know they go. So this was a semi-scientific experiment. I work in a neuroscience department, and as you will see, and people who work in offices, a lot of us have a nice common room where we sit and we have our lunch and our tea, and we discuss at lunch some of the big problems in the world, mainly dementia research, which is what we do for a day job. But we also discuss that we never can find a teaspoon when we need to take our tea bag out or have our yogurt or whatever. So being a scientist, I decided to, with my own money, of course, do an experiment. And I bought 2 sets of teaspoons, 24 really fancy looking gold ones and 24 silver ones, and dropped them into our common room cutlery mess bin and them. And my amazing colleague Jane Tulloch counted the teaspoons every week on her tea break, and we discovered that they're disappearing.
They are disappearing. What was more popular to nick or just to arrange to have disappeared, or whatever it was? The gold ones or the silver ones? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so excellent question. So in the original study, this was published in 2005, there were 3 people in Australia who published a study about disappearing teaspoons. And being a scientist, I wanted to replicate this to see if it was happening in Scotland as well as in Melbourne. And my hypothesis was that the silver teaspoons would go faster, because I thought the gold ones, you'd be able to tell. If you had one of those at your desk, somebody would know you nicked that from the common room. But Jane, who was doing the counting, and my colleague and co-author, she thought the gold ones would go because they're cooler. And Jane was right. And that was the main conclusion of our paper, is that my lab manager, Jane Tulloch, is always right, as well as teaspoons disappearing from an institution in Scotland as well as in Melbourne.
Do you think people are nicking them, being a tea leaf, or a thief, or are they just going missing? Are people putting them in the bin? We had a producer here, actually, he doesn't work here anymore, not because of this, who would go to the canteen, get a disposable kind of thing for, you know, a recycling thing with his lunch in it, get a knife and fork, and then just put the whole thing in the bin at the end of it, which I found deeply weird and mildly sinister. Are people throwing them out? Are they falling down the cracks between different desks? I mean, where do you think they're going?
Well, when I presented this at lab meeting, so once a year I presented our group lab meeting, and usually I'm going over how much money we have and successes and failures. And this year I presented the teaspoon study because people in the department didn't know we were doing this. And we asked, and no one really admitted to stealing them. We had a couple of people admit to borrowing them. We saw a couple displaced.
Did they borrow them, though? I mean, did they actually borrow them? That's a question.
I think they went home. I mean, these gold teaspoons are pretty attractive.
I like the look of those. You're just showing them up on the screen at the moment. I mean, if I saw one of those teaspoons, I'd probably think, that would go quite well with my cutlery set at home.
But we did hypothesize. So Jade and I are both mothers of teenage boys. And you know, when you do laundry, one sock often just goes missing in some sort of black hole. We think there might be a black hole. And the original Lim, Hellard, and Aiken in 2005 also proposed this based on Douglas Adams' work and his sci-fi novel suggesting that there's a whole planet full of spoonoid life forms out there. So maybe there's an actual portal to another dimension or another planet, but they're the same place where the socks go out of the laundry. But all we know is they've disappeared, and the gold ones disappeared faster. I
just want to ask you, Tara, I mean, you are a professor of neurodegeneration, looking at dementia and all sorts of associated things at the University of Edinburgh. You have done a lifetime's work of this stuff. Yet, I mean, many people will know you now for being the teaspoon lady. How do you feel about that?
I think it's good to know that scientists are people, and we can have a sense of humor as well as doing hard work. And when we work on something as important and as difficult sometimes as dementia research and people living with a disease that is really difficult, and we work really hard and we're making progress, but it's very slow. So it's fun every once in a while on our tea break to have something like this. So I am proud of this study, not quite as proud as of all the work we've done in understanding dementia, but still, it was fun.
I will raise my mug to you, but there's no teaspoon in it. I wonder where it's gone. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Tara Spars-Jones there. She is a Professor of Neurodegeneration at the University of Edinburgh. I had a tutor at university who was, I mean, extremely good in this field of medieval history, and he made the Daily Mail recently for counting how many penises there were in the Bayeux Tapestry. He's actually involved in a long-running argument with another academic of whether 94 or 95 penises in the Bayeux Tapestry. Petri Hoskin, your thoughts?
Thanks. Yeah. My nickname at school was Petri Foreskin, if that helps. Does that help at all?
Wow.
If we're talking peni.
Peni. Well, listen, there's been a lot of people in touch about this. Sod teaspoons. Where did all the blooming socks in my house go?
Do you know what? If you've got a teenager, all of your cutlery, all of your everything ends up in their bedroom. That I can tell you. All of it.
My brother had a house share, and one person who didn't wash any dishes, and they just threw them on his bed. What's coming up in your show, Petri?
I can't be that. Right, what's coming up? At the midnight for Talkback,